This young man is an 8th-level sorcerer who possesses the power to overthrow an entire kingdom at any moment. However, due to suspicion of Ian's power, the king beside him has devoted himself to poisoning Ian, who cannot accept such a tragic death. Ian has risked everything to use time magic to revert everything to its rightful place at that moment. His entire life gradually rewound before him. Ian saw many important milestones in his life, and it all seemed like a nightmare. When all those memories were rewound, he woke up in a youthful form with much shorter hair. Ian was so scared that his whole body trembled, and he hurriedly felt his body. But he could not find the stab wound from the knife, nor feel any pain at all. This made him think that something had gone wrong with his magic. What's wrong? Did something happen? Seeing Ian's pale face, a worried voice rang out from behind. The woman with beautiful golden hair was Ian's mother, but she had passed away long ago. Meeting his deceased mother here made Ian question whether he had succeeded. Or was he meeting his mother in hell? He reached out to grasp his mother's hand. This warm feeling was so real. Ian turned around to observe the scene behind him and saw children lining up. They were waiting to be tested, surrounded by knights maintaining order for everyone, and the white flag fluttering atop that ivory tower. It was unmistakable. This was not hell. Ian's magic had succeeded. He had truly returned 35 years into the past. The test Ian was witnessing was called the Reflex Test. The magic aimed at training outstanding sorcerers is the foundation for the power of the Green River Kingdom, which every child must undergo. The magical reflex test at the age of 12 consists of 2 parts. The first part is the brain magic test, which reveals magical abilities, and the second part is the mind magic test, where energy is generated. Children who meet the requirements of these 2 tests will immediately be sent to the Magic Academy and may hold a part of the national power. After graduation, Ian felt a bit confused. Returning 35 years into the past seemed much further away than he thought. Luckily, the time spell he had spent a lot of time studying to atone for his sins had worked just before he died. Initially, Ian only intended to go back to avoid causing his past wrongdoings. However, in the end, it was Jiang Na who forced him to use it. Many people had to give up everything for him, and many had lost their lives. Because of blind loyalty, a person who had devoted his life to the promise of loyalty and friendship with Jiang Na accepted to be exploited and ultimately betrayed and killed by him. Just thinking about this made Ian's blood boil, and this time when he regressed, he decided he could not let things unfold that way again. This life would be different. And to do that, he had to find something after adapting to all these events. Ian then restored his calm demeanor. "Goodbye, mother, for they have called your name over here. I will come back." The relieved smile on Ian's face made his mother feel more at ease, unaware that hidden within her small child's body was a man who was already over 40 years old. "I will come back after." The relieved smile on Ian's face gradually makes his mother feel more at ease, unaware that hidden within her small child's body is a man. He is already over 40 years old. Ian knew that in this life he would not just stop at the power of an 8th-level mage, but would have to be even stronger to protect himself and his loved ones. At this moment, he had approached the area knights to register, and when he mentioned the name Moglion Village, the knight immediately recognized him. "Ah, you're Vanessa's son, right? Come in. Don't ask too many questions, or you'll disturb the mage." The young mage responsible for checking the children was currently sitting in the tent, sighing heavily. "Aaron, how many more children are there?" "I think you have to stay here, at least for more than half a day." The knight named Aaron replied, causing the young man to exhale in exhaustion. However, when Ian stepped in to greet him, he immediately sat up straight. He smiled warmly to welcome Ian. "Hello, young boy, come in. You should bow your head a little. I will use magic to stimulate your brain. It might make you a bit dizzy, but that's only temporary, so don't worry." Ian knew exactly what was going to happen next, so he obediently cooperated with the other party. The young man quickly sensed the magical energy in Ian's mind and continued to move on to the second test, which was mental magic. However, for Ian, just joining the Magic Academy was not enough, so he proactively suggested to the other party, "Excuse me, mage, there's something I want to show you." Ian clearly saw the puzzled expression starting to appear on the other person's face, and he didn't intend to wait for a response, but immediately demonstrated a bit of his ability. Ian took a deep breath, then raised his left hand. A fireball instantly appeared in his palm before the other party could recover from their astonishment. Then another water ball appeared in his other palm. This was dual magic, a very rare case, and Ian was clearly showing off. But after demonstrating, he put on an innocent expression and said, "I don't know why. But before this, I could naturally do these things." This scene not only surprised the young mage, but also the knights standing behind him. To confirm, he asked Ian if anyone had taught him these things. "No, sir, no one has taught me." Ian immediately shook his head. Of course, this was a power he had obtained from his previous life, but how could he tell the other party that he was an 8th-level mage who had reincarnated? To investigate further, the young man decided to use a detection spell on Ian, which was a magical skill used to detect lies by examining every movement of the target's body. "Think carefully before you answer me. If you lie, you could become a criminal. Both you and your family, including your close neighbors, could be executed," came the warning from the young mage. However, his magic had no effect on Ian. A man who had gone through a lifetime of storms in the body of a 12-year-old child remained calm under the pressure of the detection spell as if nothing was happening. In response, he said, "How could I dare to lie in a place like this?" A man who has experienced a lifetime of storms in the body of a 12-year-old child remaining calm under the pressure of the probing magic as if nothing were happening. "How could I dare to lie in a place like this?" Just like that, the guy had to concede to this child. Because his detection technique couldn't uncover any lies, it meant that the child in front of him was indeed a bright gem that needed to be preserved. But before either side could speak, Ian suddenly heard a loud scream, and the owner of that scream was his mother outside. Ian's mother was being held tightly by the wrist by a knight, despite her clear discomfort as she tried to pull her hand back in a calm manner. The other party shouted at her, not knowing how many important people were inside. She had been a maid for 7 long years. "She must be very lonely at this age. She can't be sold anywhere anymore, so don't act like you're worth more than you are. It's already a blessing that someone is paying attention to you, and you don't even know how to be grateful." This knight was the same one Ian had just encountered outside the tent, and he recognized Ian as Vanessa's son at first glance. Ian thought he had mistaken the knight's cunning smile. The knight actually had ill intentions towards his mother. Hearing the commotion, Aaron and a few others from the tent also stepped out. "What's going on?" Upon seeing him, the lecherous knight quickly released Vanessa and replied, "It's nothing, ma'am. This lowly maid doesn't know her place, so I'm just teaching her a lesson." Before anyone could react to his words, Ian rushed forward. "Lowly!" He originally intended to teach the knight a lesson, but was stopped by the young mage. He informed the lecherous knight that just a few minutes ago, Ian had been recognized as a mage because he met the 2 requirements, and for that reason, his parents had power equal to that of the nobility, and those who dared to disrespect the nobility or mages were essentially challenging the authority of the king. That offense was more than enough to warrant a verdict and a death sentence. When he said this, both Aaron and the knights behind him simultaneously drew their swords, and the lecherous knight was so frightened that he quickly knelt down, bowing his head to Ian and begging him for mercy, asking him to forgive him this time. "I'm sorry, but who deserves your apology more than me?" Ian replied coldly. His tone of protest did not resemble that of a 12-year-old child at all. Sensing the immense threat in that voice, the knight quickly turned to Vanessa and knelt down, saying, "My crime deserves execution, but please give me one more chance." Vanessa was probably very confused as she hadn't adapted to this rapid change. She looked at her son with a pleading gaze. Ian sighed and then slowly walked towards the knight, sitting down to be at eye level with him. "Listen here." He lowered his voice so only the 2 of them could hear. "I know all about the disgusting people like you who speak ill of my mother. You should best go and tell them about the lesson you just learned today." "Yes, I understand. Thank you, Mage." The knight could only endure and grit his teeth in response. After finishing, Ian walked towards the young mage. "Thank you for helping me earlier. It's the duty of the lowly to protect the mages." The man responded kindly, then turned to Aaron and instructed him to look after and protect Ian and his mother, but he would provide the remaining information to Aaron through the crystal ball. Just like that, Ian was taken back to the inn by Aaron where knights like him were staying. Ian had no objections and held his mother's hand tightly. After that, he said goodbye to the young mage. The young man watched Ian's back for a long time and couldn't help but think that at such a young age he was already so intelligent and talented. It seems that the royal palace and the ivory tower will be quite lively soon. That night, when everyone was fast asleep, the drunken knight stumbled out of the inn, grumbling and cursing under his breath. He was, of course, extremely frustrated after the humiliation he suffered this morning in front of Ian, so he still harbored the ambition to one day tarnish Vanessa's reputation. Right in front of you, you would have to kneel and beg him to spare you and your mother. That scenario with him was truly beautiful, but unfortunately it would never happen because he had encountered someone with a sevenfold vengeance. In the morning, with adults present, Ian couldn't take action, but now he had come to confront him directly. Like a cat, Ian quietly approached the opponent from behind. First, he used paralyzing magic to render him immobile. At this moment, Ian spoke up. "What did you just say about my mother? I told you I would keep an eye on you, didn't I?" His tone wasn't overly serious, but this sudden appearance, along with the paralyzing magic, made the knight fear for his life once again. He couldn't utter a word. And Ian continued, "Today you were humiliated by the son of a lowly cook. You were so ashamed that you wandered off drinking in the deserted streets, and unexpectedly you slipped on this bridge. You fell into the rushing waters below and met your demise just like that." As he spoke, Ian illustrated the scene just as it had unfolded in his words. With a loud splash, the knight's body fell into the river while he stood on the bridge with a cold expression. Without a hint of emotion, Ian truly wondered if what he was doing was right. He had come this far just to learn how to atone for his past sins, to turn back time so he could make the right choices and wash away all the blood on his hands. But then encountering someone like him made him realize that he couldn't completely erase them. Ian only wanted to protect his loved ones, and he would do anything for that ideal. Even though he wished that his hands would never be stained with blood again, some people still deserved punishment, like that lecherous knight, or like the one who poisoned him in his past life. Thinking of Jang, his heart sank what had made him utter those words. It seemed he was about to understand. After completing his revenge against the one who insulted his mother, Ian returned to the inn in a state of exhaustion. He felt as if his head was about to explode. He had never thought he would be drained of magic power after just one use of such a paralyzing spell. It was understandable, as this 12-year-old body was still too immature. Ian could only hope it would develop soon. His mother Vanessa was still fast asleep and unaware that her son had just left. Looking at her beautiful face, Ian recalled the painful memories of his past life. After just 1 year of studying at the Magic Academy, he had been placed in the top mage class. His mother, who had been left behind in this Mogul land, passed away from a severe illness before she could see her son become a true mage and enjoy a life of wealth and comfort. But this time, everything would be different. Ian believed that. And you also swore that you would definitely protect your mother so that she could live happily in your past life. You couldn't even protect your friends and abandoned your family. You used to be unable to protect anyone or anything. And that is the motivation for this life, for Ian to give his all to change the next morning. In the capital of the Green River Kingdom, Green Riverium Emperor Terry. Green River is having a serious discussion with the Tower Master of the Ivory Tower, a level 5 mage named Herbert Leon. "What do you think, Tower Master?" Terry asked nonchalantly at this moment. "I cannot rule anything out. However, the magical energy is 1/0. The soul flows through the bloodstream the moment you can move that part of the soul by yourself. Then you are a mage who stimulates magic in the brain through techniques, which is the simplest method of expressing magic that is usually taught in academies. These methods are like how I and other mages have done, but there are also those who claim that it is all due to their own expression and those people. They can freely use top-tier magic like that great mage." Herbert replied in one breath. The great mage mentioned, in his words, is a great existence, thanks to his presence, humanity could only explore the adaptability of magic. He found a way to express magic without anyone teaching him. It can be said that he is a legend in the mage community. His presence is like a dragon in legends or myths. The difference is that the dragon is merely an illusion, but the existence of the great mage is real, and the reason why they mention the great mage with the ability to express magic without stimulation from others is because of Ian. With the dual magic that he demonstrated yesterday, that is something even Herbert's logic cannot explain, so he wants to see it for himself. The mage sent to the village of Mowgli is not a liar, sir. If this is just an exaggeration or misunderstanding, then the boy's abilities are truly very dangerous. This is all I can tell you at this moment." Terry pondered for a few seconds, then his gaze shifted towards the door. "The prince is out there, right?" "Yes, father." A still youthful voice came through. "It's me." "Come in," Terry requested as the door opened. A handsome face appeared. It was the current crown prince of the Hayden Green River Kingdom. Terry had personally requested Hayden to come here. Because there is something important. The last time he went outside the palace was 5 years ago. When they went on patrol, due to the recent crop failure, the king wanted his son to go out. One more trip with the royal guards and 3 level 3 mages accompanying Hayden's mission is to go to the Mongolian land and bring the boy named Ian back to this palace. Father said Ian. Right. Hayden asked back, he is just a kid. Is it too extravagant for him to go catch him with such a large group of people? Haven't you heard anything about that kid? Terry asked again, his tone sounding quite disappointed. Then he sighed. Forget it. I told you to pay attention to all the news in the kingdom. I will assign another prince to do this. So the king just mentioned it. Hayden seemed panicked. He quickly asked, Please, father, let me take this mission, and I promise to complete it without any mistakes. After a moment of consideration, Terry still decided to assign that responsibility to his crown prince and asked him to hurry back to prepare because this would be quite a long trip. After Hayden left, Herbert also excused himself, stating that he needed to return to prepare for the ceremony. Did you have anything that needed to be prepared? Terry immediately asked, knowing well that we sorcerers dislike going outside. If I don't go back now to convince them, I might not be able to mobilize 3 sorcerers to accompany the prince tomorrow. Terry felt that Herbert's words were quite reasonable. He urged him to return quickly. After leaving the emperor's study, Herbert's expression became extremely serious. The sorcerer accompanying him thought that he would now return to the ivory tower. But no. Herbert said that there were a few things he needed to prevent first. Meanwhile, in the village, Ian was still obediently staying at the Knight's Inn. But he knew very well that sooner or later, the ivory tower and the royal family would take action. He recalled the young sorcerer who had tested him yesterday, remembering how he acknowledged him as a true sorcerer right after the test ended. Ian guessed that he would likely report back to his superiors immediately. But that was exactly what Ian wanted him to do. The king was currently very eager to find a talent to accompany the crown prince. Hayden Green River and the master of the ivory tower, Herbert, was standing on the side of the 5th prince, Janna. This would create a conflict within the royal family and the ivory tower. Whether Ian was on the king's side or the ivory tower's, even if he chose his own path with his extraordinary talent, his potential was still limitless, only different in this life. Ian was no longer the naive one who let others manipulate him. While Ian was still deep in thought about this issue, a large crowd had gathered around the inn, and the loud voice of the young sorcerer from yesterday pulled him out of his vast thoughts. Sorcerer Ian of the kingdom, please hear the decree of the king. Ian jumped in surprise. The king's decree. It seemed that Terry acted much faster than he thought. As soon as Ian peeked out the door, he immediately encountered the cheerful smile of that young man. So you're awake now. The king has just issued a decree for you. I will teach you the royal etiquette first, so please follow my instructions. Ian nodded obediently, but in fact he had already mastered these etiquettes from his previous life. Thus Ian respectfully knelt down and placed his left hand on his chest. His series of actions were so precise and graceful that it astonished the young man. He wondered if this was really the first time Ian had performed this action. Putting aside that concern, the preparations were ready. Holding the magical crystal ball in his hand, the young man seriously declared, Sorcerer Ianfa, please listen to the decree of the king. I highly value Ianfa's talent and recognize you as a sorcerer of this kingdom. I allow your name to be recorded in the ivory tower. And I also invite you to visit the royal palace. My eldest son has been sent to accompany you on the way to the palace. I wish you a smooth journey. When the entire decree of the king was announced, Ian also stood up calmly. A group of knights had already arrived here. Leading them was Arnold, the captain of the Mongolian Knights, responsible for taking Ian to the Marquise's palace for him and the other knights in the team. Being escorted by the prince is an absolute honor for Ian, so his attitude toward you is also very careful, and not just Arnold. Even the Lord of Mongolian Marcus is waiting at his palace. Before Ian officially entered the castle, he continuously reminded himself to remind his 2 children, Ravi and Margaret, that they must pay attention to their words and treat the upcoming wizard with respect. The carriage came to a stop and Ian along with his mother stepped down. They bore a completely different identity from yesterday. Although Ian was still young, he could not change the fact that he is the wizard recognized by the king, and his talent even made the king restless. That is why Marcus knew he should welcome this kid properly. After entering the castle, Lord Ian immediately became a hot topic among everyone there, including the maids who all talked about how Ian could conjure fire with his bare hands during the test. Truly an astonishing child. After entering the castle, Ian was not lazy in enjoying himself. He had been at the training ground for 15 consecutive days. Ian practiced very seriously, and what he demonstrated far exceeded what other children his age could do. However, Ian was still not satisfied. This was not enough for him. If it were in his previous life after using the Frost Nova spell, he could freeze the entire Mowgli Palace. But now in the body of a 12-year-old child, he could only freeze this small training ground. This small body still had too many limitations, requiring Ian to find something that could compensate for the lack of magic. "Wizard, Sir Wizard!" A hurried voice rang out, pulling Ian out of his thoughts. A servant in the Lord's palace rushed over to seek his help because the Lord of the castle, Marcus Moglian, had gone missing. According to this man's account, Marcus had not returned to the palace after the goblin hunting trip yesterday, along with his son Ravi and the knights who accompanied him on the hunt. Currently, all personnel in the palace had been mobilized to search, but there were still no results. They could only find a few remnants left after a battle. After hearing the steward's account, Ian was silent for a few seconds. He did not think this was the time for Marcus to meet his end, even though in his previous life Lord Marcus Morgan would indeed perish at the hands of an enemy assassin, but the timing was just before the first unification resistance would occur in the future, and his son Ravi would abandon and flee from this land. Right after the resistance began, due to that cowardly act, he would be executed immediately after the war ended. He did not think that seeking the help of Wizard Marco would be more useful than me. Ian asked in return. If Marcus was hunting as usual, the likelihood of this happening due to his regression was very low. After all, Ian had to consider carefully. And, of course, he did not want to get into trouble, but the steward seemed troubled because Wizard Marco was currently not in Moglian due to another mission. This made Ian very suspicious. Marco was the wizard of this territory, but went to another land to carry out a mission. This seemed illogical. Could it be that his regression to the past truly created a butterfly effect, causing everything to deviate from its original course from his previous life? A wizard going outside the designated territory to carry out a mission was indeed very rare. Ian was not clear on the exact details of everything, but he thought it must be related to him. For example, if someone silently reported this to the master of the ivory tower, then that could pose a danger to you. The strongest weapon Ian has at the moment is the ability to foresee the future, and if Marcus alters the future, you will lose that ultimate weapon. Regardless, Ian cannot let this happen. Seeing Ian deep in thought for a while, the castle steward seemed anxious and continued, "We can't do anything more. That's why I had to come here and ask for your help. I will cooperate with you in the search. You have made your decision after our agreement." Ian returned to his room and prepared a bit. Vanessa seemed worried. She had heard about the recent events and was not at ease seeing her young son planning to go up the mountain with the search team. Even though Ian had been recognized as a true wizard in his mother's eyes, he was still too young to be doing such things. "Yes, it's fine, Mom. I'm already a wizard now." Ian seriously reassured his mother, yet Vanessa still couldn't help but worry. Ian gently took her hands. Then he promised that he would definitely return. Vanessa wanted to say something more, but suddenly a girl burst into their room with a tear-streaked face. It was Marcus's daughter, Margaret, a young lady who was usually very cold. But now she was begging Ian, disregarding her pride, to please find her father and brother. "If you can find them, I am willing to do anything to repay you. I will tell my father to give you a lot of wealth, land, and even servants, so please." Ian was so overwhelmed by Margaret's words that he felt dizzy. He just wanted to leave this place quickly. However, while distractedly glancing at the girl, he was drawn to the gold ring on Margaret's finger. Normally, wealth would not affect Ian, indicating that the ring had something special about it. "I promise to find them," Ian affirmed in a firm tone. Margaret felt much more at ease after hearing this, a smile finally appearing on her beautiful face. Then Ian suggested borrowing the ring she was wearing, claiming he sensed magical energy emanating from it. "And this might help me find the marquis. Just hearing that, Margaret had no reason to refuse Ian. She immediately took off the ring and placed it in his palm. When Ian put the ring on, a strange sensation immediately coursed through his body, reminiscent of his past life. This was not an ordinary ring. It was a Mogulian ring, a low-level artifact believed to enhance the magical energy of its wearer. It seemed that instead of giving this to the heir, Marcus had given it to his beloved daughter. "You must find them." "I'm just borrowing the ring," she said, "because this is a family heirloom that my father gave me." Seeing Ian mesmerized by the ring, Margaret looked worried. "I know." Ian immediately replied to ease her mind. He did not intend to take this artifact from her. It's just this. For the time being, he could compensate for the missing magic due to his physical limitations. With it in hand, Ian felt much more confident, and then he and the castle's night team set off. They headed towards the forest where Marcus had lost track during the goblin hunt at the spot where he had disappeared. There were still some bloodstains left on the ground. Ian asked if the night team had buried the lost ones, but they said they hadn't found anyone, so the whole team thought that those unfortunate souls had been eaten by the monsters. Ian moved a little further ahead and carefully observed. Aside from the blood, the only remnants were about 10 goblin corpses, which also meant Marcus could have been attacked by hundreds of those goblins. If that were true, he needed to find him soon before it was too late. Thinking this, Ian snapped his fingers. He used the summoning spell to call forth a spirit beast. The two words spirit beast made the knights behind him extremely tense. They thought Ian would summon a large, terrifying wolf. However, what appeared after the magic circle was just a small, immature wolf. Watching its continuously wagging tail, it looked no different from a pet dog. Even Ian felt a bit disappointed by what was appearing before him. If it were him in his previous life, he would have summoned a big wolf already. But this spirit beast looked no different from a puppy. Given his current amount of magic power, he couldn't do anything more. Ian could only accept reality. He then assigned the task to that adorable creature to find the location where Marcus and his entourage had passed. After sniffing around for a while, the spirit beast suddenly barked and quickly ran off. Ian immediately followed it, while the night team seemed to have little faith in that little dog. "We just need to follow that wolf spirit," he confidently asserted. Compared to that little wolf, Ian's words carried much more weight. The night group quickly retracted their doubts and moved forward with him. Fortunately, Marcus was still alive, but at this moment, he was lost deep in the forest, facing a horde of goblins surrounding him. So even though Lord Marquis was still fighting hard, he couldn't stop his despair. He instinctively swung his sword without thinking about what to do next. If he continued like this, Marcus would surely die from exhaustion, thinking of his little daughter at home. Marcus didn't want that to happen at all. "Ravi," he suddenly shouted, "we will deal with the goblins here. So you must definitely find a way back to the palace. Tell them that Mount Maucley is threatened by goblins." Hurry up! Marcus's heir was just a coward. The proof was that he was currently trembling uncontrollably. Even when he saw his father about to be ambushed by a goblin, Ravi was so scared that he couldn't utter a word. So the warning to him came only when the monster had jumped up and was ready to attack Marcus. He finally realized that. In that situation, it was completely impossible for Marcus to dodge or counterattack, but his fate was still extended when Ian appeared just in time. After all, he had to prevent the future train from being derailed. With just one Ice Nova spell, Ian succeeded. He eliminated the monster, and it wasn't just the goblin that was about to attack Marcus. All the goblins around had been frozen by him. That scene was truly astonishing considering Ian was just a 12-year-old child. At this moment, Marcus was completely exhausted. He could only vaguely see Ian's face before passing out from exhaustion, but fortunately, Marcus Maucley had been saved. Hearing the sound of his daughter sobbing beside him, "Oh, father! Oh, father!" Marcus groggily woke up. He looked around the room and indeed saw his daughter waiting beside him. She was surprised to see father awake and immediately called out, "Father!" Marcus did not expect to see his daughter again, so he hurriedly asked, "Is it Margaret?" He slowly sat up in bed, rubbed his temples, and asked his child what had happened. "What happened?" Margaret recounted everything, reminding him that Lord Ian had saved him. She couldn't hold back her emotions, tears streaming down her face. "Father, oh father, you and brother have been unconscious for 2 days. You have no idea how worried I was. Just as I heard the news, the steward rushed over to inform me, 'My lord, thankfully you have awakened.' when he saw him arrive. Marcus immediately asked about the current situation. Are Hoga and the others all right? However, he hesitated and couldn't find the words to answer that. After a moment of hesitation, he finally clarified. 12 soldiers and Lord Rotten could not return. Hearing this, Marcus fell into deep thought, then asked the steward, "Where is that mage?" "I must meet him in person." Ian was training alone in the training yard when he suddenly heard someone call his name. It was Hoga, who had come at the behest of Lord Huan. "Here he is," he said. Ian replied, "I heard the Lord has awakened," and Hoga happily responded, "Yes, it's all thanks to you, Mage." After a few greetings, he respectfully mentioned the matter at hand. "The Lord has ordered me to bring you to the guest room. I think he has something urgent to discuss with you." Hoga finished speaking, but Ian still did not understand Lord Huan's intentions. After a while, Marcus had dressed appropriately and went to the guest room. He saw his benefactor had arrived and cheerfully exclaimed, "Welcome!" Accompanying him was his son Ravi. Ian immediately inquired about the Lord. "How do you feel in the spacious room?" The steady voice of Marcus rang out. "Thanks to everyone's concern, I feel much better now. I sincerely express my gratitude for your assistance in ensuring the present and future of the Mogulian family and our homeland." While listening to his father speak, Ravi stood behind him, also smiling at him. Marcus placed his hand on his chest to express his deep gratitude and continued, "Because you also swept away the goblins of Mogrilin Mountain and protected our territory, we cannot call you the great lord of the empire if we overlook this, and not reward you appropriately, so after careful consideration, I have chosen this." He spoke while pointing to the gift. Marcus gently requested, "Please open it." Ian followed suit and opened the box. Upon seeing the item inside, he was wide-eyed in surprise. He was holding a muggle ring. Ian listened to the Lord's explanation. "I heard from Margaret that you wanted to borrow this ring. Because you can detect mana from the ring." Mark Storm asked Ian. "I thought it was just an old heirloom, but what power does this ring have? Does it help you in any way?" Mage Ian explained this ring amplifies the mana of the wearer. It has been very helpful in sweeping away the goblins in the canyon. Hearing this, Marcus showed clear joy and said to him, "Thank goodness for that ring. I want to gift it to you, Mage. Please consider it a token of attention." Ian turned his focus back to Lord Huan when he heard him say that. He looked up and asked, "A token?" Marcus confidently declared, "From now on, Mage Ian is..." Marcus confidently declared that from now on the wizard Ian would be in charge. "You will forever be regarded as the esteemed guest of the Morrigan family. This will be the token for this enduring promise. Will you accept this token?" Ian reached out to touch the ring. He did not rush to answer the Lord because he was silently thinking about being forever the esteemed guest, a pact lasting 1,000 years for the nobility of the empire. Seeing him hesitate, Marcus bowed his head and continued with all sincerity, "Our family will always welcome you, Ian, should you need assistance from us. We promise to always stand by your side." Meanwhile, he remained silent. The two of them, father and son, placed their hands on their left chests and vowed, "We swear on the northern flow of the 6 rivers that we will abide by this promise." From this generation to the next, the scene shifts to a path through the forest near the Lord's residence on the morning of the next day, where the captain of the Mogulian Knights, along with a few soldiers, was escorting Ian to somewhere. After a while, without arriving, Ian impatiently asked the captain, "How far is Loy Town?" Anon replied, "We will be there soon. Just over that hill, and you will see it." Hearing this, he said nothing more, and simply directed his gaze toward the direction the captain had just mentioned. At this moment, a memory surfaced in Ian's mind. "My lord, I have something to ask you. Do you know of any alchemist in your territory who can create potions?" Marcus replied that in Loy Town to the north, there was an alchemist named Vito. He placed his hand on his chin and added, "They come from the capital, but due to a special herb, they move north." Ian remembered this and whispered the name to himself. Alchemist Vito. A hint of worry crossed his eyes. This was a name he had never heard in his previous life. He hoped he could find a potion to replenish the mana he had lost. "I can't afford to lose it." The voice of a soldier in the team interrupted his thoughts. "Captain, there's a wizard over there. We can see Loy Town." However, the scene before them was complete chaos. The entire Loy Town was engulfed in flames. Ian's eyes widened in shock at the sight. Anon and the soldiers immediately became alert and drew their swords. At that moment below the town was a scene of devastation. Not only were the houses burned down, but the townspeople of Loi were also being slaughtered by a gang. Blood was spilled everywhere. Fresh blood still lay on their axes. It turned out that the axe belonged to the leader, who hoisted it onto his shoulder and casually ordered his subordinates to gather. The gang began to regroup. A satisfied smile was evident on his face. He continued, "Finish quickly so we can move on." After the leader's command was given, the subordinates immediately seized a nearby boy. He struggled in desperation and shouted, "No!" The boy's father, Radio, rushed over, calling out for his son. "It hurts too much." As Radio approached, he was knocked to the ground by the bandits, who began to kick him while cursing. "You're about to die. You're such a worthless piece of trash." He was kicked so hard that blood splattered everywhere, but he did not stop. Witnessing his father's torment, the pain was unbearable, and he continued to struggle. "Let go! Let me go, Dad!" The leader, hearing the screams beside him, turned and said, "Shut up, you annoying little brat." Then he uttered cruel words to the child. "If your father dies, will you be quiet?" Douglas immediately held the person back and tried to suppress his tears, perhaps fearing that if he made another sound, his father would no longer be safe. However, the robber did not stop. He raised the sharp knife in his hand towards the father and coldly said, "I will sell your son to a very beautiful place. Farewell," as he spoke those words. In his eyes there was no trace of humanity left. Only an extreme madness remained. At that moment, Douglas desperately called out, letting out a heart-wrenching scream at the moment of his father's life and death. He was astonished to see the robber. He was pierced through by an ice spear, and drops of red blood continuously splattered onto Douglas's face, leaving him stunned and silent. The leader was dead instantly. Just a second later, his subordinates finally realized the problem. One of them kept exclaiming, What is that?" Another now understood what had just pierced through their leader. It was ice. The bearded man was also panicking, wondering where that came from. At that moment, the robbers began to whisper to each other, "Over there, soldiers!" At this point, Ian did not bother to speak to them and continuously cast ice magic towards those people. Sharp ice spears fell like rain, accurately striking them. The robbers screamed loudly and scrambled to escape. "Damn it, run!" However, no matter how fast they ran, they could not escape the ice spears of the mage Ian. The town was now filled with the desperate screams of the robbers, echoing for a while. After everything was resolved, Ian stood alone on the cliff. He was concentrating on sensing the changes in his magical power. Ian looked at the muggle ring on his hand and thought to himself that it was effective. He looked at it longer, thinking that thanks to the ring, his mana limit must now be equivalent to that of a third-level mage. He returned to the town. Although he had eliminated the robbers, the damage they caused was countless. Several nearby houses had been burned to ashes, and the townspeople, from mothers, children to strong fathers, were now kneeling and crying for their deceased loved ones. The young mage Ian stood alone watching that devastated scene when suddenly a voice called out, "Sir Mage." It turned out to be Anon calling him. He immediately inquired about the situation, asking if any soldiers were injured. He replied, "No thanks to you, we are unharmed." Ian felt relieved upon hearing this and responded, "That's good." But inside, he couldn't help but worry about the healer. He was searching for, wondering if they were still alive. Just then, an urgent call rang in Ian's ears. He heard a familiar name and turned to see a man named Baton trying to support Radio, who was barely hanging on, struggling. "Come on, Douglas," he called out anxiously. Ian, after seeing the person he wanted to find, immediately approached, touched Douglas's shoulder, and said, "I'll take a look." Ian's eyes widened in shock because he saw Radio's current condition was not promising. His skin was pale, devoid of blood, and his hair had turned white. A thought flashed in Ian's mind. Could it be mana poisoning? A condition that makes it impossible for a person to live or die, considered a curse from God, because if a certain amount of mana enters the body without the heart, the mana fragments will not stimulate the body, causing the brain to suffer intense pain for the rest of their life with no moment of rest. Ian looked at Radio's current condition and made a judgment he couldn't inject mana into himself, so surely one of the mages had done this intentionally. He thought to himself, looking at the symptoms, it seemed quite severe. However, Ian quickly came up with a treatment method and said, "Wait a moment," then placed his hand on his forehead because there was a way to suppress the pain for a moment. That was to transmit pure blood mana and release the residual mana in the body. Just a few minutes later, the pained expression on Radio's face had relaxed. It is to transfer pure blood mana and release the residual mana in the body. Just a few minutes later, the painful expression on the Radio's face has now relaxed. After finishing the treatment, Ian said to the old man, "Please take care of the wound." The old man stammered in response, "Yes, thank you." Just as Ian turned to leave, suddenly a small hand grabbed his shirt, pulling Ian back. It was Douglas. He hesitantly asked, "My father, will he be okay?" Ian looked at the boy and replied briefly, focusing on the matter at hand. For a moment, he thought that it might be possible to temporarily treat the illness by transferring mana, but he couldn't cure this cursed disease completely. Hearing this, Douglas anxiously asked again, "So, he will have a pain attack later?" Ian did not answer the child, but silently thought that the mana he transferred would become residual mana. That person would have to make a decision. Ian remained silent, looking at Douglas. The heartfelt words that should have been spoken were kept hidden in his mind as he continuously transferred mana and endured or died. Although he already knew the outcome, he only told Douglas it should be fine. The boy understood, and his face turned pale. Douglas trembled all over. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he immediately resolved, "I must find Lander's flower and make the antidote." Saying this, the child turned and ran away. The old man saw this and hurriedly shouted, "Douglas, where are you going?" "Where are you going?" Ian held him back upon hearing that name. At that moment, he recalled the name of the greatest alchemist in history, a tall boy with a serious demeanor, completely different from the suffering, desperate child he was now. That boy later became the royal alchemist of the palace, the suffering Haman. Ian remembered his cold gaze, a person who had once been very poor, now standing next to Emperor Jiang. Thanks to his genius ability, when Ian saw him in his previous life, he always had a hostile attitude towards mages. Thinking of this, Ian recalled everything that had just happened, piecing together an alchemist poisoned by mana from a mage, a type of herb he sought in the north. Every word Douglas had just said echoed in his mind. I must find Lander's flower and make the antidote, which led Ian to an inevitable conclusion, a type of herb capable of neutralizing mana in the body, if that were true. A voice echoed in Ian's head as if to remind him. It was a type of poison that neutralized mana in his blood. At that moment, Ian remembered everything. He stood there in shock for a moment, and then Ian cast the acceleration spell to prepare to chase after Douglas. In the blink of an eye, Ian was right in front of Douglas. Startling the boy, he stopped. Then Ian placed both hands on Douglas's shoulders to hold him back. There were still robbers outside the village, and it was very dangerous in the forest. Tears welled up in his eyes in pain. "But I can't wait any longer. If I don't find that flower and make the antidote soon, my father will. While in pain, he sobbed as he spoke. Ian had cast the sleep spell. In pain, he unconsciously said, "I must." The next moment, he staggered and fell unable to stand. As he collapsed onto Ian's shoulder, he muttered, "The flower." Ian gently supported the boy who had fallen asleep on his shoulder. A while later, green sunlight filtered through the leaves, illuminating the forest where the boy lay peacefully asleep on the lush green grass. His small face was now incredibly calm and harmless. Far from the memories of Ian's previous life, it made him reflect deeply. Looking closely, he saw that if the boy's previous face was not so intimidating, scary to that extent, then the current face looked just like before. Ian sat silently next to Douglas, thoughts swirling in his mind. If he hadn't come to Loy Village, his father would no longer be alive, and he would be sold into slavery by the robbers. Douglas's indifferent appearance in his past life reminded Ian of the type of poison he must have ingested in his previous life, which was likely concocted by him. Surely he followed orders and created that poison. Although he knew Janna's plan, he thought about it. Ian suddenly paused for a moment, as if he was contemplating something. He glanced at this child version of Douglas. Then a thought crossed his mind, should he eliminate him? However, that intention was immediately countered by himself. Acting hastily could be very dangerous, because only Ian knew the infinite future of Douglas. He had the talent to become the greatest alchemist in history. Ian could turn him into an ally. Although he thought so deep down, Ian still felt uneasy. Even if he lived differently than before, it couldn't be guaranteed that he wouldn't betray him. His hand adorned with the Mowgli ring froze for a moment. The wizard seemed to have made a decision. Just then, someone called Ian. Captain Wizard Arnold approached, and Ian immediately asked, "What is it?" He was panting and replied, "Suddenly you ran off, so I chased after you." Once his breathing stabilized, Arnold looked over and saw Pain grab there. He curiously asked, "Who is that child?" Ian didn't elaborate on what had just happened, simply responding, "I think he might do something reckless, so I put him to sleep." After saying that, he slowly stood up and continued, "Since you are here, please take him back to the village." Ian brushed past Arnold, who then asked, "Aren't you coming with us?" Ian glanced back and hesitated, saying, "I have to go to a place." Just as he finished speaking, he could no longer see his figure. Only the sound of the wind remained. That night, at the small house of the two fathers and sons, the radio was still on. Although it was late, the light shone through the window, and the radio sat beside his son's bed. He looked at his son for a moment and then spoke, "Hey, Glat, are you asleep?" Hearing his father call, he stopped pretending to be asleep and replied, "Not yet." He glanced at his father and said, "Dad, I heard a wizard came to the village and saved us. And I also heard you were trying to do something reckless." "You little rascal," he scolded him like that. Glat felt guilty and explained, "I was just trying to find a flower." It seemed that he was well aware of Douglas's intentions, but for his son's safety, he frowned and reminded him that there might still be robbers near the village. As soon as he finished speaking, Glat suddenly sat up. His next words mixed dissatisfaction with concern for his father. "So what should I do? The wizard said you would be in pain." At that moment, the radio could only reassure him with one sentence, "Dad is fine." He added, "If you find the flower of Landier." Hearing this, Douglas could no longer hold back and sobbed, "It's been a year and you haven't found it. Does that flower even exist?" Just then, suddenly, a voice of someone spoke up. It confidently said, "It exists." The two fathers and sons jumped and looked towards the direction of the voice as if someone was standing right at the door. Glat, tense, shouted towards the door, "Who is it?" Receiving no answer, he shouted again, "Who is there?" At this moment, the person was standing in front of the house. At this moment, the person is standing at the front door. Let's get straight to the point. I heard you were looking for linden flowers inside the house. Suddenly, there was a moment of silence, and after a while of hesitation, the radio slowly opened the door as the person took off their hood. It turned out to be a familiar face, the wizard Ian. He politely stepped into the house and said, "Excuse my intrusion." His eyes widened in surprise, and then he vaguely recognized. It was that wizard. The radio was also surprised to hear his son say that it was the wizard who had saved him that morning. Then Ian slowly introduced himself, "I am Ian," and placed a small block of ice on the table. That quickly caught the radio's attention, and he immediately asked, "What is that?" But just a moment later, when he clearly saw what was inside the block of ice, the radio couldn't believe what he was seeing and exclaimed, "It turns out the item Ian placed on the table is exactly what I've always been searching for." It was the Lander flower. Ian knew that the radio desperately needed this flower to heal, so he made a suggestion, "I will give you this flower." "But let me ask you a question," Ian asked seriously. "How did you know about this herb?" If its effects are still unclear, Rito hesitated to answer immediately and finally replied, "It's from a diary." Rito repeated, "I saw it in a diary." Then he didn't hide it anymore and directly took out the book. "This book is the herbal diary that my father left for me." Meanwhile, Rito's hand flipped through the pages and stopped at one page. If you look at this page, in the middle of the diary, it clearly recorded information about the Lander flower, which has the effect of neutralizing mana found only in the northern continent. It is a 12-petaled flower. It is toxic in the stem and roots wilting immediately after being picked and cannot be cultivated or harvested. Ian took the diary and looked at it directly, then asked, "Does your father also know how to brew potions?" Rito replied, "It's my family's business." After hearing that, Ian immediately understood that this diary was a family heirloom, and he confirmed it's quite similar. Ian looked straight into his eyes and said, "Then you must know that for a wizard with a heart of mana and a brain of mana, the Lander flower's ability to neutralize mana is a deadly poison." Hearing this, the radio was stunned for a moment, then immediately explained, "I understand your point, but my family's potion masters would never create a potion to harm others." Fearing that he wouldn't believe him, Rito asserted, "I could bet my family's reputation on it." However, Ian's sharp gaze had shifted elsewhere, finally resting on Douglas, making the boy a bit surprised when being stared at. A few seconds later, Ian's blue eyes gradually relaxed, then said, "I understand." He then picked up this block of ice containing the lander flower and said, "Thank you for answering my question." Suddenly, Ian slowly added 2 more words. "There's more." After that, he cast a spell on the block of ice. A green flame flared up in Ian's hand as he then said, "I'm sorry." The block of ice completely melted, and the lander flower immediately wilted. He looked at the remnants of the flower falling down and said, "Even I couldn't find it. I could only freeze it and preserve its shape." The radio was astonished and realized, "You tricked me," Ian replied. "I just wanted to prove that you could always find the lander flower." At that moment, he made another suggestion. "Mr. Radio, how about we make a trade?" He still didn't trust Ian after the earlier trick, so he hesitated and asked, "Trade?" Rito silently listened as Ian clarified, "I will continuously transmit mana to you so that you won't be poisoned by mana and die." He assured, "I also promise to find a way to allow you to use the lander flower." But in his heart, he thought he could definitely find information related to it, the information that Xana and Douglas had found. Ian added, "So please come with me to the capital." After hearing this, the radio immediately asked, "The capital, why should I go there?" Now, the radio finally stated the conditions for the trade. "Please create a mana potion for my mana deficiency and learn how to make an antidote for my mother's illness." Ian added, "So please come with me to the capital." The radio, after hearing this, asked again, "The capital, why do I have to go there?" Now, the radio finally stated the conditions for the exchange. "Please create mana potions for my mana deficiency and learn how to make the antidote for my mother's illness." Hearing this, he wondered if he couldn't ask a famous alchemist for help, since I wasn't that skilled. Ian replied, "I want someone to be with me and continuously provide potions." "Give it to me." He then looked at Douglas. The boy had run into the forest full of bandits to find the herbs that could cure his father. "Please make the right decision." At least because he was in pain, Ian noticed him and was taken aback for a moment. A surprising thought flashed in his mind. This boy was not an ordinary child. Who is he? Then he made a small request. "Can you give me some time to think?" Ian didn't care about the time, so he coldly replied, "As long as you need." He looked at the two of them. Thoughts raced in his mind in this life. Douglas shouldn't lose his father or become a slave. Ian kept looking ahead silently, waiting for the boy's answer. He looked at Douglas, who was smiling innocently in front of him. He thought that his talent wouldn't fall into Jang's hands. The next morning, Ian patiently stood looking at that house, waiting for the two of them. Anne's voice suddenly rang out from behind. "Sir Mage," he heard and turned around. "He came to report that we were ready to return to the Lord's castle." Ian was silent for a long time. It seemed he still wanted to wait. However, the door showed no signs of opening, so Ian had to reply, "Let's depart." While Ian was drowning in disappointment, he still hadn't made a decision. Suddenly, the door slowly opened, and Radio and his son stepped out with a few simple belongings. Down Glass called out to the mage. Ian glanced over at them. His expression was somewhat surprised, but he turned and walked over to ask them, "Have you made a decision?" Radio hesitated and replied, "I've made my decision. What other choice do I have?" "I have to live first," he said while walking down the steps with his son. At that moment, his face showed clear joy as he said, "Please keep your promise." Receiving the answer he wanted, Ian brightened up. Of course. His gaze suddenly focused on the little boy, as it seemed Douglas wanted to say something. The boy hesitated and spoke up. "Can you really cure my father?" Ian sighed in relief and smiled at Douglas. "Yes, I promise." The boy still wasn't very convinced and confirmed once more, "Really, with all his patience." Ian gently replied, "Really?" Hearing this, Douglas immediately became cheerful. "Then, can I consider you my leader?" Ian felt a bit awkward, but still tried to respond, "Sure." Douglas placed his hand on his left chest and seriously said, "Yes, sir, leader." Looking at the carefree kid in front of him made Ian couldn't help but think of how cold and ruthless Douglas was in his past life. "Get out of my sight." He couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Was he like this when he was young? Just then, suddenly, the sound of horses galloping towards them caught Ian's attention. He turned to look while Douglas was still confused, not understanding what was happening. A soldier on horseback arrived. He dismounted and hurried to Ian, saying, "Sir Mage, we must quickly return to the castle." Ian asked him, "What happened?" The soldier immediately explained the situation. I heard the prince has crossed the Gamas River. Ian's eyes flashed with surprise. He crossed the Gamas River already. The soldier stammered, yes, this news just came in this morning. Ian didn't respond to him, but thought to himself, why are they only informing us now? It seemed he knew what to do next. Can I borrow your horse? He asked back. Do you know how to ride? Ian walked up to the horse and gently stroked it a few times, not very skillfully, but it could become my friend. It turns out Ian could befriend the horse by using taming magic. After getting on it for a few seconds, the horse's gaze changed. It obediently listened to Ian. I want to go to the castle. Can you take me there? Suddenly, the horse stepped back a few paces, then gently lowered itself to the ground, allowing Ian to easily climb onto its back, while the onlookers were still in shock. Ian then spoke, instructing, please be safe. Make sure to bring the video along. At that moment, Ian successfully climbed onto the horse's back and hurriedly added, I will go ahead. Scene changed to this side. The Prince Hayden's convoy continued to move forward, going through the ranks of cavalry with the royal carriage in the center. Inside the carriage, Hayden sat in thought, looking through the window. He recalled past events. You called for me, father, the Emperor Terry said sternly. I have something to tell you before you leave. Hayden was startled to hear his father say that Herbert frequently met with Prince Hayden. He listened in silence as his father spoke, because many nobles act according to the ivory tower. So you must know how important it is to know whose side the master of the tower is on. At this point, Terry understood. He guessed that it seemed the master of the tower intended to side with Prince Hayden. More than anyone else, he always understood his son. Prince Jiangna was a smart child. He would surely take advantage of Herbert and try to pull those with names under his banner. Terry paused for a moment and looked at Hayden, at which point he said, Ian, do whatever it takes to make him your own. Before approaching him, Hayden remained silent, but his father's voice continued to seep into his mind. He was telling him to make the boy his ally and build a foundation. Remembering a tense memory, he sighed in frustration and ran his fingers through his hair helplessly. Even if he were a wizard, what could a child do? The ivory tower was full of wizards, yet none of them were on his side. Suddenly, Hayden's gaze became extremely serious. How dare he abandon me the heir and choose Prince Hayden? Thoughts continuously flashed through his mind. The day I ascend the throne, I will eliminate those scoundrels. Just then, the captain of the second night squad, Oliver Zeus, approached the carriage and got straight to the point, saying, I think it's best to inform the Mogullian family. Hayden did not even glance at him and directly replied, I remember we had already discussed this right, but Oliver still insisted we must give them time, at least to prepare before you arrive. Please consider it. Hayden, showing clear signs of annoyance, said, By the way, isn't your family part of the Mogullian clan in the north? Oliver replied, Yes, that's correct. Hayden's voice echoed from inside the carriage. How much longer until we arrive? Oliver estimated the distance and replied, It seems it will take another 2 days. At this moment, his expression slightly changed. He smiled and ordered, Good 2 days is enough. Send them a message. His mood was now filled with anticipation mixed with a bit of disdain, saying, Let's see if the Northern Guards or the Empire's Shield will prepare for the royal visit in 2 days. What do you think? Hearing this, Oliver did not dare to speak any more. He had to comply with the prince's wishes. Yes, your highness. Scene changed to the mansion of Lord Marcus. He was focused on directing the servants. This is where the prince will stay. Remember not to miss a single speck of dust. Marcus waved his hand to give orders, but at this moment he was very distressed. I thought they wouldn't come since no one reported anything, but suddenly, as the lord of the Mogullian territory, the scene shifts to the mansion of Lord Marcus, who is focused on directing the servants. This is where the prince will stay. Remember not to miss a single speck of dust. Marcus waved his hand to give orders, but at this moment he was very melancholic. He thought they wouldn't come since no one had reported anything, but suddenly, as the lord of the Mogullian territory, all worries must be kept hidden in one's heart, so he turned to continue asking the butler Hoga if the other families had arrived yet. Hoga replied, All the families have arrived except for the Markfaden and Zeus families. They have reported that they will arrive soon. Marcus's eyes showed a hint of fatigue as he asked further, What about the wizard? Is there still no news? Hoga, a bit flustered, replied, No, not yet. At this moment, Marcus became tense as he thought about the current situation. It was really critical. For now, he decided to go outside, and after a while, soldiers from the gate shouted, "To announce His Highness, the Crown Prince has arrived." Shortly after, the Crown Prince's carriage slowly entered the estate of the Marquis, and at this moment, the black carriage finally came to a stop. He slowly stepped down, exuding a serious demeanor that was hard to match. At that time, Marcus and the other families were already standing in the hall to welcome the Crown Prince. A man turned to whisper to Marcus, "Where is the wizard?" Just as he hesitated to answer about the wizard, suddenly a loud shout cut him off. From the direction of the voice, a horse slowly approached. Following the earlier command, it stopped. It turned out that the person riding the horse was Ian, who struggled to hold on to its back as if afraid of falling off at any moment. A few seconds later, Ian slowly raised his head, his hair all messy. Then Ian spoke, "Sorry I'm late." Marcus awkwardly replied, "You have arrived, that's what matters. Please follow this way." The people around, seeing Ian's appearance at that moment, began to whisper among themselves, "That kid is the wizard from the rumors. He can't even ride a horse." Marcus placed a hand on Ian's shoulder and said, "You have been summoned by royal order. You must stand in the highest position according to the Empire's laws." After he clarified the situation, the two of them walked to meet the Crown Prince. They stood looking at each other in silence for a moment before Hayden spoke first. "You are Ian Fa." Ian did not immediately answer him, but carefully observed the Crown Prince. In front of him, thoughts flashed through his mind, a face he hadn't seen in a long time. He then looked at the wizard standing nearby, and over there. Ian noticed a girl with black hair among them. As if sensing someone was watching her, she turned to look at Ian and smiled. Her name was Cecilia, and a smile appeared on Ian's face. Because he knew very well that she was a spy from the Empire, time flowed on transitioning to the party inside Marcus Oliver's estate. At this moment, he was patiently reminding the Crown Prince, "Your Highness, you must not drink too much." However, Hayden ignored him and replied, "What else is there to drink besides this wine?" He expressed his dissatisfaction. "I can't believe I have to socialize with these annoying nobles. After traveling such a long way, this party is no fun at all, and I don't like that brat. I want to go back and rest early." Hearing the Crown Prince complain, Oliver could only listen in silence. On another side, Cecilia held a glass of wine standing in a corner of the wall, separating herself from the noisy crowd. She pondered, thinking it was indeed a strange coincidence. The Empire was also interested in that kid. Cecilia recalled that not long ago the Empire had issued 2 directives to eliminate rumors about Ian Fay by personally observing him. Thinking this, her eyes sparkled with determination. "If it's true, I must capture both the wizard kid and his mother and return to the Empire." Cecilia looked at the nobles in front of her, but did not see Ian anywhere. What kind of person was he to cause such chaos? "I guess I will go find him." She walked alone to the training ground not far away. When she saw a familiar figure, she immediately recognized him. "If it's true, then I must capture both the little wizard and his mother and return to the Cecilia Empire, looking at the nobles in front of him, but not seeing Ian anywhere. What kind of person is he to cause such chaos? So chaotic like this. I guess I will go find him." She walked alone to the training ground not far away, and upon seeing the familiar figure, she immediately recognized him. Cecilia stood behind, preparing to ambush Ian. Should she test the rumored power of his starting with something gentle would be a good idea. Something equivalent to a moonstrike. Just as she thought of the spell, it shot quickly towards him, with each arrow landing right where Ian had just stood, dust and smoke immediately filling the air. Cecilia's eyes were still focused on observing, when suddenly she widened them in shock, witnessing that all her attacks were blocked by the wizard she had looked down upon. Blocking everything, she then realized belatedly, "A shield." Ian glanced at her, questioning who she was. Cecilia calmly replied, "You don't know my magic." "I'm your senior, just here to say hello." He asked again, "Is that how you greet others?" With a disdainful look, Ian Cecilia retorted mockingly, "Oh my, look at this kid talking. I'm just joking around with my junior." "You don't need to make me feel bad." Not hearing the end of her sentence, Ian accurately called her name Cecilia, causing her to pause, confused as to how he knew her name. But upon hearing Ian's next words, Cecilia flinched. At that moment, she truly felt fear, as if her plan had been exposed. She hurriedly asked, "Who are you? Anim Shisit." "How do you know that name?" Ian calmly replied, "I know you very well." The reason Ian was aware of all this information was due to old memories that he shouldn't have. You wiped out the Walker clan lurking in the kingdom in your past life. Ian smiled knowingly. If you want, I can also name others. Cecilia, feeling uneasy, interrupted him. Stop talking nonsense. However, Ian continued, the kid at the Morgan family estate. His footsteps drew closer to her as familiar names were listed one after another. Royal Secretary Robin Ariel from the National Guard, the 9th Squad assistant, and the head maid of the palace. The head maid probably hasn't arrived yet. Ian tilted his head, looking at her and asking, do you know the common traits of these people? I think I do. Cecilia was about to lose her composure, glaring at Ian. I don't understand how you know these names. At the same time, Cecilia began to cast fire magic. She continued, but you'd better pretend not to know them. Then she immediately launched a gigantic fireball towards Ian, the blazing force illuminating the night sky. Cecilia clenched her fist, staring at the sea of flames she had just created. She seemed to think she had taken him down, but in an instant, from within the still-burning flames, a figure as swift as the wind emerged. Cecilia was stunned to see Ian stepping out safely, not a scratch on him. Ian slowly approached, holding a magic orb in his hand. I already knew you were a member of the Walker family. She tried to maintain her composure, asking, then why are you here alone if you already knew? But inside, she was still astonished. Did he really evade her earlier attack? What was he? Ian spoke while raising the glowing orb high. I knew you would come looking for me at the training grounds. Cecilia's gaze followed the movement. She had lost count of how many times she had widened her eyes in shock since meeting Ian, because before her were a series of ice spikes aimed directly at her. Under the dim moonlight, the ice spikes sparkled, mysteriously shining like a deity at that moment. He confidently stated, I've already guessed. Then Ian coldly pointed his hand at her. Ice spear. Following his command, a barrage of sharp ice spikes shot towards Cecilia, who hurriedly stepped back in panic. Luckily for her, she managed to set up a mana barrier just in time before her body was hit by the hailstorm. However, Cecilia's barrier couldn't hold for long and soon began to show cracks. She cursed in horror, and at that moment, Ian conjured a massive fireball its power could be said to be. 10 times stronger than Cecilia's fireball from earlier, Ian's cold gaze pierced through her as he chanted the fire explosion spell at that very moment. Ian hurled the gigantic fireball towards Cecilia, and fear took over her mind. She couldn't move with the mana barrier. She would die in this life-or-death situation. Cecilia had to make the decision to drop the mana barrier to be able to move. As soon as it disappeared, she immediately turned and ran for her life. However, the ice spears continued to pierce through her skin. Her flesh was cut all over by the spears, but this was still better than dying, thanks to that decisive choice. Cecilia narrowly escaped the horrific explosion caused by the fireball, her body covered in injuries as she turned in horror to look at the shockwave right behind her. At this moment, she was still in shock from what had just happened. I'm still alive. I just escaped death by a hair's breadth. Cecilia lay sprawled on the ground, thinking to herself that the guy must have exhausted his mana from using fire explosion. Plans began to form in her mind. This spy and the others would start coming here. There was no evidence to show that she was a spy, and they wouldn't suspect her just because of a child. The mages of the tower wouldn't believe her either. She remained there contemplating. So when I recover, I will deal with it later. Meanwhile, Ian was slowly walking towards her, casually saying, I have a plan to make a name for myself. By selling you. Ian uttered those words with absolute calmness. Yet at this moment, Cecilia was still very pleased, saying, Do you think you can? Ian's lips curled into a mysterious smile. Of course. There's evidence that even you don't know about it. She began to feel uneasy. What was the kid talking about? Shortly after the royal knights and mages of the tower arrived, Oliver quickly spoke up, asking what had happened. Cecilia and the mages saw her lying down. On the ground, they rushed over to help her up and asked, What happened to you? What are these wounds? Ian straightforwardly admitted, I did it. Hearing this, everyone turned their gaze to him. Oliver seriously told Ian, Please explain the situation, what happened? Ian immediately switched to acting mode, lying without blinking. I happened to see that woman. Talking to a masked man. Cecilia was astonished, her eyes wide open. What? His expression showed a hint of grievance as he continued. Then she suddenly tried to kill me. Hearing this, Oliver understood the gist of the story. He concluded that the hid must have caused her to end up like this. Ian quickly defended himself. Because I need to live. Oliver cautiously asked, Can you prove it? Ian replied, I appeared as if they were checking something. A mark on their body. Oliver, hearing this, was skeptical, thinking for a moment before. He ordered the examination of the other person's body without hesitation. 2 mages accompanying him reached out to protect her. A guy named Fim spoke up first. Captain, don't you think this is a bit excessive? Have you forgotten that we are mages of the tower? As the captain of the Royal Knights, Oliver showed no hesitation towards them and immediately drew his sword, pointing it straight at the 2 of them. They were frightened and stepped back a few paces. Oliver sternly raised his sword and said, The one with the highest authority here is me. And this happened for that reason. Whether the wizards of the tower are involved or not, we have a responsibility to uncover the truth. The film that was once bold is now cowardly in saying so. At least let me heal her first, Oliver coldly replied. You can do that after the overall examination. He then waved his hand, calling for 2 female knights. After checking on Cecilia for a while, the examination was completed, and Cecilia immediately asked the 2 female knights if there was anything suspicious. The 2 girls bowed their heads and replied, We found nothing at all. The film began to shout, What did I say? Why can you suspect her? We must urgently heal her right now. At this moment, Oliver, who didn't want to suspect, still had doubts about Ian. Is it a lie? But Ian shook his head and replied, Of course not. He then confidently stepped closer to Cecilia, startling her, as if she feared her secret would be discovered. Ian approached her from behind and said, Excuse me. Cecilia glanced back and asked, What are you planning to do? Ian did not answer, but placed his hand on her neck and performed some sort of spell. Suddenly, everyone was astonished at the scene before them. It turned out that a mana seal was clearly visible on Cecilia's neck, and even Cecilia was surprised by this seal. What did you do? Ian smugly replied, I was wondering what you 2 were doing. It seems they were checking because of this. Memories from his past life rushed through his mind like a movie. Cole Walker was sent to a training camp with a mark that they did not know about because only the manager was aware of it. Even though he found out only after interrogating a manager for a year in his previous life, it also took him a long time to realize it. Oliver at this moment still did not know about the secret of Cole Walker, so he turned to ask the 2 wizards, Does anyone know what this sign means? The film hesitated and said, This is the first time I've seen it. Oliver then asked Ian, What about you? Ian pretended not to know and innocently said, It's my first time too. Ian smugly thought to himself that even if no one knew what it meant, it was still evidence. After a moment of contemplation, Oliver ordered to heal her, and then we will interrogate. Then he looked at the 2 wizards of the ivory tower and requested, Please prepare a mana prison. They reluctantly agreed yes. And after assigning the task, Oliver looked at Ian. He said, If all of this is true, the Emperor will reward you. Ian pretended to be surprised when he heard this. Although everything was already in his calculations, Oliver reported what had just happened in the training ground to Crown Prince Hayden, who was astonished and asked, That child defeated a level 3 wizard from the ivory tower. Oliver replied, That's right. Hayden laughed, saying, I didn't expect it to actually happen. The Crown Prince then asked for the feelings of the person standing before him. What do you think, Captain Oliver, about that child? Oliver seriously replied, It seems that what the wizard sent to investigate is correct. That child does not behave or speak like a normal child. He folded his arms and began to ponder. He said, I think we should meet the kid and talk before drawing any conclusions. Captain, bring that kid here. A moment later, as Ian entered the room, he respectfully bowed and said, You called for me, my lord. The Crown Prince got straight to the point. Yes, according to what I have heard, one of the wizards sent by the ivory tower is a spy from Cool, and I also heard that she is quite a skilled wizard. Upon saying this, Hayden praised Ian. I think your achievement in defeating and capturing is commendable. However, Ian humbly replied, I'm just being flattered. A satisfied smile appeared on Hayden's face as he continued speaking, and so I want to reward you. Please tell me what you want. Ian could fully understand the intention. What is the true desire of the Crown Prince, he thought to himself, trying to figure out his inner desires by asking himself what he wanted. Since he was already here, should he just say it? Ian hesitated and said, Well, if you allow me, I want to. Seeing the old ivory lighting spot on the way to the castle, Ian looked straight into the dark eyes and said, "That dark place, why do you want to go there?" "There's nothing to see." He pretended to be confused, intertwining his hands, and hesitatingly exclaimed, "I've only heard about it through stories and have always wanted to go at least once." Hearing this naive answer, Hayden gradually relaxed his guard because he thought visiting a historical site was what the kid wanted while he could ask for anything. Perhaps he is still just a child. So Hayden easily accepted Ian's request. "All right then, I will take you there." Ian secretly bowed his head and wore a smug smile, thinking he would be able to get it sooner than expected, feeling delighted at the thought of what was about to happen. Approaching the old ivory lighting spot and the item hidden deep beneath it, the dragon language scroll played an important role in the study of magical creatures and contained the essence of the language. Excitement gradually appeared on his face. In his previous life, he found it a few years before he died, so he only understood a very small part. This time, how much more would he understand? A few days later, the royal escort took Ian and his close companions to the capital. Inside the carriage, Ian was filled with a joyful atmosphere. Ian's mother couldn't contain her excitement as she looked out the window. This was the first time she had traveled this far. She turned to her son and cheerfully said, "Isn't that right, Ian?" Ian smiled happily at his mother. "Yes, that's right." Accompanying them was a video. He sat next to them in a cheerful mood, saying, "Once we reach the capital, I will be the tour guide. Madam, please overlook my appearance. I have worked in the capital with that sorcerer for a long time." Vanessa smiled brightly and replied, "Oh my, thank you." Ian grimaced, thinking, "Look at this guy just at this moment." The sound of hooves clopping beside the carriage caught Ian's attention, and he looked outside as the second Imperial Knight, Vice, approached to announce, "Cousin Ian, we have arrived. This is the old ivory lighting spot." Ian requested to come here. Vice said, "Our plan is to stay here for 2 days." He smiled and added, "And as the Emperor has commanded, you will be free to explore this place." During that time, Vice cheerfully said to everyone, "Please follow me, everyone. I will guide you." He led everyone to a small village next to the old ivory tower to rest overnight. The village was truly peaceful in the stillness of the night. The village chief, hearing that royal and sorcerer guests were visiting, came out to welcome them, unable to believe that they were visiting the village. It was truly an honor for generations. Hayden happily replied, "It's nothing." And Ian was a bit surprised to see the crown prince being so friendly with the people. He thought to himself that perhaps he treated the residents kindly. Memories from his previous life flashed through his mind at that moment. He always had a gloomy and hostile expression on his face, partly because Jiang Na was always by Ian's side looking at that bright smile on his face. Ian also understood, so perhaps that's why he made that expression. For those who are not of noble or royal blood, he pondered, I can see why. The current emperor surprisingly prefers his eldest son, so Douglas came to call the leader when he would come to light the old ivory. Ian then asked back why he was asking that Douglas, confused, expressed that he also wanted to go there. Ian sighed, thinking he needed to go to the underground area at dawn, then replied to Douglas that it would be tomorrow when he had free time. The boy, obediently like a little puppy with sparkling eyes, asked if it was true that they would go together. Ian was a bit unaccustomed to the cute image of the boy, so he could only respond casually. Douglas smiled with his eyes squinted and said thank you, while the two boys were chattering away. The video behind said to Vanessa that Douglas seemed to really like Ian. Then he turned and whispered to the lady, "There's something I want to ask." Radio was curious enough to say all his thoughts out loud. "Has Ian always been this mature? I don't see that kid resembling a 12-year-old at all." Vanessa looked at her son with a gentle gaze and replied, "Ian has matured too quickly. The boy is very kind and knows how to take care of others, just like his father." She sincerely confided to the radio, "I know he won't say it, but surely the boy is trying to fill the void of his father, and I feel really sorry." He thought to himself that kid resembles his father. Radio asked further, "So your husband is also a wizard?" Vanessa shook her head to indicate no and replied, "No, Fan is an ordinary person." The image of her husband still lingered in Vanessa's mind. Her voice had a hint of sadness when she mentioned the Fan who went missing before Ian was born after going to work as usual. Only the belongings were returned home 5 years later. Her gaze fell and sadly she spoke, and now Ian had been thinking of the husband who had been missing for 12 years. Vanessa's words choked as she sighed while speaking to the radio. Never mind, it's nothing after that. They followed the villagers' arrangement to their resting place. The next morning, as dawn broke, Ian appeared at the old ivory tower, slowly walking and reflecting on the scene. Similar to a past life, it was a journey through the winds and the path of stars. Then Ian remembered his past self, an endless journey after the Unification War, far from the ivory tower. Just like the Empire, thoughts flooded back. Was it simply a coincidence that he entered the ivory tower afterward? He rebutted himself. It wasn't like that. He was guided by something. Lost in thought, Ian realized he was already standing in front of the ivory tower. Whether in this life or the previous one, this place still looked the same. Ian stepped inside the tower, unable to help but recall the history of its formation. 300 years ago, there was a war between the wizards of the Ivory Tower and the Dragonians, descendants of dragons, when the Gagoi army and the dark magic of the Dragonians were strong enough to destroy the Empire. But the Emperor and the High Wizard Nyson Green River led other High Wizards. He fiercely resisted and defeated the Dragonians, and caused the Gagoi to become extinct, protecting the peace of the Empire. However, that great man, Mizzen Green River, who led them to victory, refused the position of emperor and instead became the owner of the tower, creating the capital Green Riverium. Ultimately, this place was destroyed and abandoned. Ian walked around the tower. It seemed he was looking for something. It's around here. Ian's hand gently touched a mechanism right after that. The ground beneath his feet suddenly changed. In an instant, a staircase leading down to a tunnel appeared before him. Here it is. Ian did not hesitate and directly entered. The space below was completely dark. Ian immediately cast a spell to light up a glowing orb that resembled a small sun, illuminating every corner here. The rays gradually dispelled the surrounding darkness, and then suddenly a statue resembling a monster was revealed. The statue depicted a humanoid creature, but with long arms. Sharp fangs and wings made it look incredibly lifelike. Ian looked at it and thought to himself that he was truly surprised when he first saw that statue. At that moment, suddenly, it began to shake continuously, and a second later, it immediately moved, transforming into a flesh and blood monster and roaring fiercely. The reason he was surprised when he saw it was that he had never thought it was a gorgon, which had been extinct 300 years ago, hidden here. In an instant, it jumped off the stone pedestal out of Ian's sight, but just a second later, the gorgon appeared before Ian, charging wildly towards him. Ian remained extremely calm. From his hand, a water orb appeared, quickly amplified, and shot straight at the monster, catching it off guard. It took a terrifying blow to the stomach. The force of the water orb was so strong that it slammed the Gagoi hard against the corner of the wall before finally stopping. Ian silently observed the scene before him as he was quite worried. In his past life, it was very simple to kill it, but now he needed to put in much more effort. Indeed, just as you feared, the rooster crowed without a care in the world. In its eyes, there was only the image of Ian, as if it had determined that you were its target. It was necessary to eliminate the rooster. Kicking hard against the wall to gain momentum, Ian quickly thought of casting ice magic, and sharp ice spears shot forth as he chanted the spell. Rising from the ground, the monster caught off guard was immediately pierced through the belly by the ice spear, its painful scream echoing throughout the space, and it did not stop there. Ian continued to launch his next attack, electric currents glowing around his body. Ian's gaze was resolute as he looked at the rooster, and the next moment, a powerful lightning bolt struck down upon the monster. After a while, it finally stopped resisting as its entire body was charred and smoking. Ian looked at it and thought he had dealt with the rooster, calmly considering his next step. Now it was just a matter of time. Just as predicted, shortly after, a secret mechanism appeared beside him, and a door slowly descended, opening a passage inside. Ian smiled with satisfaction, thinking it was just like the last time. Then he gently used the feather spell to descend from above, landing softly without any difficulty. Each of his steps began to take the first steps down here. According to his memories from his previous life, Ian did not hesitate to walk forward to where a book he wanted to find was placed. He happily thought he had found it sooner than he expected. The dragon language scroll lay alone on the table. A thought suddenly flashed in Ian's mind. He wondered who had hidden it here. He tilted his head curiously, whether it was a dragon or a wizard. Ian's hands held the book gently. The dragon language, a mysterious language he did not even understand in his previous life. If he could think of this now, Ian suddenly paused a bit. It turned out this scroll was completely blank. There were no words at all. Ian carefully flipped through each page of the book, but there was not a single page with text. What had happened? Suddenly, he thought of a possibility it might be because he had already used it in his previous life. Seemingly having figured out the reason, Ian slowly closed the scroll. He silently thought that if in his previous life he could read it one more time, his mouth opened as if wanting to say something. However, he froze for a moment. Now Ian realized one thing: he could not produce any sound. Yet Ian quickly calmed down and thought. The dragon language was not a sound through speech. It was a miraculous language that used mana as its root. Thus, there was only one explanation: he could not use the dragon language because it had disappeared. Because he could not use magic without the dragon language, he could not turn back time. Regret was evident on his face as he thought he could continue. But if he thought of it another way, knowing this early was good for Ian, because things could have been worse if he had not known about this. More than anyone, Ian knew well that his second life had just become heavier. A scene of a prosperous city gradually appeared in his sight. The soldier announced, "Ian, we will soon arrive at the capital Green Riverium." The convoy carrying Ian and his family was gradually entering the city gates. Ian sat in the car looking through the window. Finally, they had arrived at the capital behind the bars that were imprisoning Syria inside. Ian thought to himself that he should be more cautious because there was a real possibility that if Cecilia escaped and contacted another walker, the Empire's walker would begin to monitor him. For that reason, Cecilia would certainly talk about him, the one who knew everything about the existence of the walker, and things would become more troublesome in many ways, Ian's train of thought. Suddenly halted by the events occurring outside, Ian's convoy, led by Oliver, was being stopped. Herbert and his group of thugs spoke up, forcing them to halt. Oliver paused for a moment to get a clearer look at the person in front of him. At that moment, he realized it was the leader of the Ivory Tower. Then he dismounted and questioned him. "What right do you have to block the way?" Oliver was taken aback when he heard him say, "I have received an order." Herbert calmly took out the order paper and said that it stated all. The authority to interrogate Cecilia and related matters would belong to the Ivory Tower. "Perhaps you are in a bit of a hurry," Oliver said, not backing down. "But did you receive the authorization paper even before the agent arrived? What is going on?" But Herbert insisted that it wasn't something like this, so it should be handled as quickly as possible, yet he told you to take a rest. Captain Ivory Tower will take responsibility from now on. So don't worry, that statement is no different from an insult to a knight captain like you. But Oliver could only grit his teeth and endure because he had an order. Then you had to order your subordinates to hand over the guilty party to the Ivory Tower leadership. Hearing the three words, "the guilty party," Herbert immediately reminded the captain that she is not yet a guilty party before the truth is revealed. She is still a wizard of the Ivory Tower. Please pay attention to the words. Oliver's hands tightened, though very dissatisfied. He could not disobey the Emperor's orders, and Oliver's soldiers could no longer endure. They complained to each other, "We were the ones who came to capture her, so why do they claim authority like that? The captain is being unfair. Even if it's an order from the Emperor, I still can't accept it." At this moment, Ian, sitting in the car, observed everything. He thought to himself that he could see what they were trying to do because he knew one thing: they were not trying to protect her as a wizard of the tower. They just didn't want a mere knight to interrogate a wizard. Now they would lock her in the deepest dungeon of the tower and try to make this process smoother. Even if she were a spy from the Oat clan, she would not be able to escape. Vanessa, sitting next to Ian, was unaware of what was happening outside and said randomly, "Why is it so chaotic out there?" Ian reassured his mother a few words. "It's nothing, Mom, don't worry." Then he turned to one side and sighed. "There's one more thing I need to take care of." Ian's attention was drawn to a call from outside. "Ian, the prince wants to go somewhere before we return to the castle." The scene shifts to a luxurious, grand, and vast villa. Ian stepped out of the car and immediately recognized, "This is the villa that was granted to me by Jiang Na when I reached level 5 in my previous life." Hayden gently approached from behind. "Do you like it?" He smiled and continued, "This is the villa you were gifted." Ian immediately bowed respectfully and said, "Thank you, my lord. Your grace is unparalleled." Den laughed joyfully and replied, "What are you talking about, kid?" Ian silently compared the two lives. In his previous life, he was 26 when he received this villa. And in this life, it was 14 years earlier. It was quite beautiful. Den did not notice Ian's thoughts and happily nodded, considering that now the kid's family would live here. Come with me to the castle. We need to meet the Emperor right. Just as Den finished speaking, Ian felt a bit shy. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something. Then he decided to express his feelings. If you allow me, may I tour the villa with my mother? Den easily agreed to that request. Of course. At that moment, Ian's face showed rare excitement. He immediately thanked the Crown Prince. The villa was clearly very grand from the exterior design. Even the decorations inside were incredibly luxurious. Vanessa looked around in astonishment and exclaimed, "Oh my, Ian." Following his mother, he asked, "Do you like it?" She hesitated and replied, "How could I like it?" At this moment, Ian said, "Let her know this is our home from now on." Vanessa was surprised and asked back, "This place?" Her little son replied calmly and confidently, "Yes." Ian looked at his mother happily and felt joy as well. He remembered what had happened. When he received this villa in his previous life, his mother had already passed away. Meanwhile, Vanessa was still marveling, unable to believe it. Is this really a place to live? More impressive than the Lord's castle, Ian thought, even though he had once been a great wizard. Then I still can't bring Mother back. Then you explained to Mother that this place was once used by royalty, and she is amazed. Once again, royalty, looking at Mother's silhouette still present here. Ian silently made a resolution, but now it was different. What he wanted to do for Mother, and wanted to do with her, was now possible. He stepped forward to ask her how she felt about this place. "How do you feel, Mother?" At the same time, Ian was very much looking forward to seeing his mother's happy expression, something he couldn't see in his previous life. His heart was pounding. Along with the rosy cheeks of a 12-year-old boy, Ian was happily waiting for his mother's answer. Soon after, she replied, "It's spacious, beautiful, and very large, too." But it was accompanied by the worry that any mother would have. "But how can we clean all this up?" Ian immediately froze when he heard his mother's response, which was beyond his imagination. He struggled to speak. "Mother," she asked with concern. "What's wrong, Ian?" Ian said nothing, but silently thought he would ensure that from now on Mother wouldn't have to do housework anymore, so that Mother wouldn't have to think like this. Scene shifts to the royal castle Green Riverium. Ian was adjusting his sleeves while pondering with a bit of worry. He had never met the Emperor alone even in his previous life. At this moment, he had changed into a formal outfit suitable for an audience with the Emperor back when he graduated from the academy and saw how the world operated. The Emperor had been lying in bed waiting to die, the head of this country. In Ian's impression, and everyone else's, he was an emperor praised for his bravery and wisdom. Ian followed the guide, looking around curiously, because he was very eager to learn from the Emperor if possible. From the window, Ian looked over to the adjacent castle and immediately recognized it as the prince's palace. Memories flooded back. What was he doing now? The fifth son and the child of the concubine that prince, although resembling the emperor the most, was born lacking his love. He was Jeong Na, who was also Ian's old friend, and always his greatest enemy. Ian couldn't help but worry about what he should do when he met him in this life. The guide finally stopped in front of a room. He said, "Ian, please go this way. The Emperor is waiting for you." Then the door slowly opened, and Ian straightened up, ready to step inside to face the Emperor in that room. The Emperor and the Crown Prince were waiting for him. Ian knelt down respectfully. "A lowly person like me is honored to meet you." Terry's stern voice rang out commanding. Ian looked up. He looked at him and said, "The hero of the North, Ian the little brat, has achieved a lot in such a short time." Ian replied, "Thank you, your majesty, as the emperor of the country." Terry didn't pay much attention to the details. He said, "No need to try too hard. The little brat has never been taught etiquette, so that's enough. Stand up." Ian stood up slowly at his command, thinking again about the previous sentence. He had never been taught etiquette, so there was no need to try too hard because that sentence was very familiar to him. Even the first time he met Jeong Na, he said the same thing to him. Terry then said, "You have traveled a long way to get here. Do you like the villa? I have gifted you one of my royal houses." While he was talking to Ian, Hayden, who was standing beside him, also noticed him. Their eyes met, and Hayden cheerfully waved. Ian didn't dare to be rude in front of the Emperor, so he replied, "It's a very large place that I can't even imagine." But in his heart, he kept complaining. What is he doing in front of the Emperor? Terry heard this and asked further, so, do you like it or not? Terry heard that and asked if he liked it or not. With all his sincerity, Ian replied, I like it. My mother seems very happy, and it appears that Terry is also quite satisfied with that answer. He smiled and said, is that so? Immediately after, he asked straight to the point, so, kid, are you cautious? The reason we sent the heir to bring you here and gifted you a villa as soon as you arrived is to hear that straightforward question. Ian hesitated a bit, wondering if he should be more direct. He looked at the elegant man in front of him and couldn't help but think of the 5 straightforward red-haired princes who never hid anything, as he resembled the Emperor. So it seems he is the same. No, not yet. Ian clenched his fist tightly, trying to restrain himself, because until he had everything he wanted, he was just a 12-year-old child. He needed to act appropriately. Ian thought it would be best to behave like a child at this moment. He replied as innocently as possible, isn't it because I'm more talented than others? According to what they said, it seems my magic is better. So Terry interrupted, are you more talented than others? He asked again, do you think so? This made the atmosphere in the room suddenly tense. Ian still didn't know how to respond, and Hayden felt uncomfortable seeing him in such a predicament. So he raised his head and called out, Father! Hayden tried to force a smile and then rescued Ian. What does a child know? Terry was a bit surprised when his son spoke up. He thought to himself, this is the first time I've seen the boy defend someone. It seems this little wizard will be the best choice to assist with Hayden's inheritance. He thought, then replied, that's right, Terry continued with Ian. We called you here because of your talent. Even knights and wizards recognize that talent. He had to give a compliment. I've heard that you helped a lot in identifying that spy in the room with just 3 people. The Emperor's voice rang out steadily. Because a citizen's achievement deserves to be rewarded. Now tell me, do you want anything? He bluntly asked Ian like that. Ian was secretly pleased because he had achieved his ultimate goal and finally had the Emperor's authority. He had thought about it a lot. He always reminded himself that he was just a child at this moment. Hayden spoke up to answer for Ian. He once said he wanted to visit the old ivory tower. He's very curious. All kids at this age are. I think Father should allow it, Hayden said, expressing his thoughts. A smile appeared on Ian's lips, and Terry didn't think much and directly agreed. I will give you a seal. As long as you are here, you can move around with that. Next, a servant brought that seal to him as ordered. Ian was surprised that it was made of gold, continuously sparkling in his hand. Terry added, you can also give it to someone and ask for directions. He asked, is that all you want? Ian softly replied, what more could I want? At this moment, the Emperor cheerfully said, then I will reward you. Bring it in. After his command, several female servants entered one by one, bringing in a large chest filled with gold coins. Terry said, this is a reward for you. Then turned to the 10 female servants beside him and said, these servants will clean the villa every day. I will send them to the villa so you can comfortably see them. This made Ian remember his mother's worries. It seems that Mother won't have to worry anymore. Ian sincerely thanked the Emperor, and after a while, everything finally came to an end. Ian stood alone outside the door, pondering that he must be different from others. Instead of attracting him, he felt more suspicion. He thought that it must be the same for everyone. Just like Zhang Na thought, he tightened the seal he had just received in his hand. Doubt is fundamental for ruling and managing. That's how he liked to put it. Each line of thought followed his footsteps, focusing on the important task at hand. He didn't have much time. After a while, Ian walked alone to a garden in the palace. The guard there noticed him and asked the wizard what brought him here. Ian replied in an innocent tone, where is the garden, sir? Then he happily took out the seal, saying, the Emperor told me to show this. The guard saw it and immediately changed his attitude. Yes, please go this way. I will show you. In his mind, Ian thought he would try to act like he was just touring the famous place. After a while, Ian finally made it. He had entered the sanctuary of the Empire. His expression was a bit unhappy, as he recalled a saying he liked from his past life. Zhang Na had told him that this place served the Emperor and the Empress. No one else could enter, except for the royal family. He was just a prince, so he couldn't currently, but one day he would definitely get there, right? He had smiled and asked him that. Back to the present, Ian had stepped inside where the flickering oil lamps illuminated the surrounding space. Ian crouched in a corner of the wall. It seemed like he was sneaking around doing something. He saw the guard dozing off, realizing that normally the other guards were always alert, but now they were dozing off because Ian had secretly cast a sleep spell on them. After making sure there was no one watching anymore, he ventured inside to search for something. It should be near the Emperor's coffin, right? Ian kept searching around, thinking it must be around here. Suddenly, Ian's attention stopped at a spot. He opened his eyes wide in surprise. Found it! Ian joyfully exclaimed in his heart. The heart mushroom! He immediately skillfully used his spear to pick the mushrooms he wanted. Ian sighed. Perfect! This will be enough. He slowly put them into his bag. Suddenly, at that moment, a voice came from over there. It's so late. Where are you going? Ian held his breath when he heard that voice. A bad thought flashed through his mind. Please don't say it's... Ian quickly cast a light suppression spell, and the space inside became pitch dark. A few people outside were whispering about something. Occasionally, Ian could only catch a few words. What? But he didn't know what they were discussing. Someone replied, I understand. Ian felt a bit nervous. He stood silently in a dark corner of the room, waiting to see what was happening outside. Just then, Kelvin walked in and spoke up. Your Highness the Princess, even so, this place is a bit... At this moment, Ian, hiding in a corner, thought to himself, the princess. Currently, there are only 3 descendants. No matter who it is, it can't be Jiang-na. Princess Harry Green River softly replied, Not many people visit this place, and honestly, it's rare for anyone to pass by. The sound doesn't escape from this room. Princess Harry Green River softly replied that not many people visit this place, and honestly, it's rare for anyone to pass by. The sounds do not escape from this room. She added that as a princess, her job was to manage this sacred place. And you will check the magic that has been cast on it. We all have our roles. Hearing her voice, he immediately recognized that it was Harry Green River, the younger sister of the Grand Prince. Kelvin asked, Your Highness, why didn't you let Thap-nga know? When he mentioned this, Harry immediately changed her attitude and shouted in protest, No way! Her delicate eyebrows furrowed slightly. Didn't you know that Thap-nga is very dangerous? But when she remembered her father and her brother Harry's expression became cheerful as she said, I'm sure our ancestors will understand because this is for His Majesty and my brother. They see the determination of Princess Kelvin. Knowing he couldn't convince her, he had to comply and said, I understand, then I will do my best to assist you until the very end. After that, he turned to ask if she remembered the spells I taught you last time. The basic ones. She excitedly replied, Of course. Kelvin praised her, very good, and then made a request, then please show me the light first. Harry also took it seriously and performed the spell, allowing the mana to flow like this. Sure enough, moments later, this princess was able to create a small ball of light. Ian in the dark corner was amazed at the sight. The princess was using magic. Harry saw his light and complained, Why is mine so small? Kelvin patiently explained to her, Because you just started practicing magic recently. Ian recalled Harry Green River in his previous life. She lived her entire life like a bird in a cage, and when Jiang-na ascended to the throne along with the Grand Prince being executed, she followed her brother and quietly ended her life. It wasn't until this life that Ian realized unexpectedly that a woman like her was a sorceress. Why is she hiding something? Ian was a bit curious about her reasons for doing so. Because in the Green River Empire, hiding the potential to become a sorceress was considered a crime. Educating magic privately outside the Ivory Tower and the Academy was the same. And I'm sure that sorceress knows this. I don't know what Harry's intentions are, but she asked Sir Kevin, Next time, please teach me an attack spell, to like a volcano, for example. Kevin replied to the princess helplessly, Even I can't use that spell, Your Highness. Hearing this, Harry quickly defended herself. I was just joking. Suddenly, it seemed that Harry sensed something behind her. She immediately turned her head to look at Kelvin, who then asked, What's wrong, Your Highness? Harry said, Just now I thought I heard a sound. This news struck Kelvin like a bolt from the blue. He feared that the two of them would be discovered. Do you think someone saw us? That would be very bad. Kelvin said worriedly, Let's end it for today. Kelvin worriedly said to just end it today. Harry reassured him, Don't worry, Sir Kelvin, only royalty is allowed to enter here. At this moment, it was already evening outside. Ian had been outside for who knows how long. He looked up at the sky and thought to himself that today he had discovered many surprising things, not least that Harry Green River was a wizard, something he hadn't even known in his previous life. Ian recalled the princess's fierce reaction earlier and could guess the reason she had recklessly committed a crime by hiding it from the tower. It must be because she was wary of the tower supporting Jang, Ian thought, as he walked out reflecting on how he had wasted quite a bit of time in there. As he passed by the gate, the guard spoke up. "Sir Wizard, have you finished your tour?" A bright smile appeared on his face as Ian looked innocently at the guard, thinking to himself that this was more than enough before replying, "Yes, I am satisfied now. I'm being busy in this." A moment later, at Ian's villa, as he stepped through the door, the radio rushed out to greet him. "Sir Ian, you have returned." He approached and asked, "Yes, where are my mother and the others?" He replied, "Madame Fa is chatting with the servants sent by the palace while Douglas is touring the mansion. According to the radio, his son is behaving like a little puppy, excitedly exploring this new house." The boy couldn't stop exclaiming about how big it was. After hearing this, Ian said, "That's good. Mr. Radio, can I talk to you for a moment?" So the two of them went into the room to talk. Ian, feeling relieved, spoke up. "I want you to brew a potion for me." Radio asked curiously, "Which potion are you referring to, sir?" He then presented a bag of mushrooms he had just picked earlier and explained more about these mushrooms. "This is the Heartstone mushroom. It is poisonous, paralyzing the body and causing the heart to stop." Hesitation was evident on Radio's face. "You want me to brew a potion with such a dangerous mushroom? Isn't poison still a potion?" At that moment, Ian mentioned, "Have you ever heard of interrogation magic?" He hesitated for a few seconds, but replied, "I have heard of it." Ian clarified his intention. "I need a potion to help avoid that type of magic. Can you do it?" As soon as Ian finished speaking, Radio agreed, saying, "I will have to conduct experiments. Is it urgent?" "The sooner the better," Ian insisted, making his request urgently. While Radio was pondering something, Ian noticed a knock at the door from outside announcing, "Sir Ian, the Ivory Tower has sent a letter for you." After a moment, a maid respectfully brought the letter in. Ian slowly took out the paper and read each carefully written line. "Dear Wizard Ian Fay, similar to the royal family. The Ivory Tower is also very eager to meet you, so although we were supposed to wait until the official enrollment day at the academy to meet teaching a talented wizard. And other new wizards shouldn't be too difficult, right?" Ian focused on reading each line in the letter. "Therefore, I would like to propose that we meet in a week. And I hope you will accept the Ivory Tower's request." As a wizard whose name is on the Ivory Tower's list, after finishing reading the letter, Ian immediately said to Radio, "You have 1 week." He was surprised and asked back, "1 week?" For the first time, Ian showed such an attitude towards Radio. Is it that difficult? He knew for sure that it couldn't be negotiated. So he reluctantly replied, "Of course, 1 week is not a problem. It's just that I will have to sacrifice my sleeping time." The Radio sounded disheartened saying that, but Ian could not change this decision. "Then I apologize for bothering you, but I will rely on you. That luxurious green carriage is Ian's, and he is on his way to the Ivory Tower." Ian sat alone in the carriage, rummaging through his coat pocket. A dark vial of potion was in his hand, which turned out to be the video potion made from mind mushrooms. Drinking it would stabilize his heartbeat for 2 hours. Anxiety appeared on his face. 2 hours only. From the small window of the carriage, Ian gazed outside. He saw the towering Ivory Tower ahead. This was where he had given up everything and left in his past life. Now Ian had returned to this place. After a while, a servant announced to him, "Sir Ian, we have arrived at the Ivory Tower." As soon as Ian stepped down from the carriage, a gentle voice caught his attention. "You have arrived, Sir Ian." A girl emerged from the Ivory Tower. She introduced herself as Maris and greeted him with a smile, welcoming him to the Ivory Tower. Maris enthusiastically said, "Please follow this way. I will guide you to the Tower Master," and she led Ian inside. This was the first floor of the tower, the entrance hall. Maris introduced it to him. Ian looked up and surveyed the place. Seeing this familiar scenery made him think that both then and now, neither the present nor the future had changed. This place remained the same. Maris pointed ahead and said, "Do you see that golden disc?" Ian replied, "Yes." And she explained its function. It helps you move to different floors of the tower. It is a device called the Mana Lift. According to Maris, the golden discs were for high-level wizards, so they could go directly to the highest floor. Would you please step onto the disc? Ian slowly stepped onto the golden disc. She continued to guide him. The high-level wizards are waiting for you in the Tower Master's room on the highest floor. Well then, goodbye. As soon as Ian was settled on it, the golden disc beneath his feet immediately lit up, revealing a magical circle shaped like clocks. In the next moment, a dazzling beam of light illuminated the entire entrance hall. Ian stood calmly inside it. Perhaps it was because he was too familiar with this from his past life. At this moment, Ian tightened his grip on the potion vial in his hand, and just a second later, he drank it in one gulp. Soon, the golden disc arrived at its destination and stopped. At this point, Ian was ready for everything that was about to happen. He walked towards a large black door. Then the door slowly opened, and Ian entered. Upon seeing him appear, the master of the ivory tower, Herbert immediately greeted him warmly. He arrogantly sat in his chair and spoke in a condescending tone. "Thank you for accepting our invitation to the tower, Sir Ian." Ian remained unresponsive, and he continued, "Don't just stand there. Please take a seat." Inside that room, there were many others besides Ian. He might be quite surprised, but there was no need to be afraid, he said, as they all stared at him intently. According to his words, this was just a small requirement that every wizard joining the tower had to go through. Ian slowly sat down on the prepared chair. He understood their reactions well enough. From the atmosphere, it was clear they wanted to ensure he would obey them. Herbert spoke while opening some information panel in his hand. "I already know about your talents, but there's no need to consider them. You are quite remarkable already." "To be honest, I still have some doubts," he spoke without even glancing at Ian. "But aren't we mana brethren with a bond stronger than blood? If we can eliminate doubts, we should do it right now." Ian replied innocently, "Do you mean you will torture me?" Herbert crossed his arms and denied, "Oh my. How could we do such a thing? There is no place for barbaric behavior in this tower." Suddenly his gaze changed completely, becoming extremely sharp as he said that we would only ask a few questions and you just need to answer them in that tense atmosphere. He announced that it was time to begin. From Ian Herbert's personal information, it was read accurately from the line that Ian was born in 488 under the Aries zodiac sign. His father's name is Fenfa, a wandering explorer, and his mother's name is Vanessa F.A., who used to be a maid in the castle. "Is there any incorrect information?" Ian honestly replied, "No, they are all true." The bald man beside him asked further, "I want to know more about your relationship with the alchemist Radio." From this information onward, Ian began his performance with the help of a potion, calmly responding, "My mother is very weak. I need an alchemist who can provide a steady supply." And the Lord introduced him to me. Another person questioned Ian, "Why did you visit the old ivory tower?" He replied, "I saw it in many books. I've always wanted to go there." Next, the man in blue named Ronan also spoke up. "Do you remember the sorceress, Cecilia?" Ian casually replied, "Of course I remember," as the serious tone of the guy echoed steadily. "You saw her and a masked person talking, and Cecilia was caught trying to kill you. Can you confirm that this information is true?" Since she remained silent, Ian pretended to be scared while recalling that scene and said, "I swear I thought I was going to die." The white-haired woman also chimed in, asking, "Do you swear that no one taught you magic?" Ian replied firmly, "Yes, never." She still couldn't help but doubt and asked him rapidly, "Then how do you know about fireball summoning spirits and ice spirits? How do you know so many spells? I want to hear a reasonable answer. You don't mean to say that you just do it, do you?" Ian replied, "I just think about them." Then he explained further. "For example, imagine fire in the palm of your hand." He stated plainly, "I just need to imagine it, and one day it becomes real." Hearing this answer, they immediately shouted, "Impossible! That's absurd!" After a while, they continued to discuss Ian while only Herbert remained calm, pondering. He had a serious expression. Even the strongest probing magic of the ivory tower was saying that the boy was telling the truth. His gaze never left Ian for a second. A thought crossed his mind, the legendary first sorcerer. Could it be that the boy is his reincarnation? However, a series of other possibilities also appeared in his mind. Or the boy is a sorcerer of such high rank that even the probing magic of a high-level sorcerer has no effect. It's absurd for that child to have so much mana. Herbert's eyebrows were increasingly furrowed. What is this? Just then, amidst the chaos, Helen, a level 4 sorceress, stood up angrily and shouted, "Enough!" Her attitude at this moment was very dissatisfied, saying, "Why do you keep asking useless questions? Don't waste time anymore. Ask real questions." Ian also didn't know what to do. In the current situation, those around him kept urging her to calm down. "Helen, calm down. The Tower Master is still here. We all came here to ask him right. Don't waste any more time. Just ask the real question." Ian also didn't know what to do. In the current situation, everyone around kept urging her to calm down. Helen, the owner of the tower, was still here. "We all came here to ask it right." However, Helen continued to arrogantly step in front of Ian and questioned him using a rude tone. "Tell us what you are with that mouth of yours. Why aren't you saying anything other than nonsense?" Hearing Helen's harsh words, Ian thought to himself, "That's right. She is that kind of person." Looking at the red-haired woman in front of him, Ian recalled that Helen was the youngest level 4 sorceress before he arrived. And, just like her nickname, the Lady of Fire. Very aggressive, but he also didn't want to back down. Didn't she already know that? Helen was taken aback when questioned back. Ian pointed to his information board and said, "It's written over there." His voice echoed as he read those lines again. "Ian born in 488 Aries. Haven't you read it?" Hearing this, Helen was immediately angered. She clenched her fists, and her face was now filled with rage. "How dare you say that?" While the two were still in conflict, Herbert suddenly raised his voice. "Enough." His gaze seemed to pierce through Ian. Herbert spoke sternly. "Ian F.A., let me ask you one last question. Do you remember before you took the mana reaction test? I heard there was a small incident where a soldier disrespected you and your mother. Do you remember that soldier's name, Jonathan?" Ian remained silent, listening as he continued. Herbert's tone carried a hint of suspicion. The next day, they discovered that soldier had died when he was found. It was said that there were traces of mana on him. He then directly asked Ian if he was related to the soldier's death. Ian kept silent, thinking to himself that the Tower Master was indeed not just a name. He looked at the serious expression on Herbert's face and concluded that this person was not overly confident in his magic. He always considered a third possibility in such situations. A normal person would lose their composure and fear being suspected of being a murderer, but at this moment, Ian remained extremely calm, detailed calculations racing through his mind. If his heartbeat remained steady, he would be suspected even more. Ian was now pondering that he had said this was the last question. So, should he negate the effects of the drug now? Ian's determined gaze spoke volumes. He had decided that he would give them the answer they wanted to hear. At that moment, Ian skillfully negated the effects of the drug. And his heartbeat also became irregular as he answered the next question, "I don't know anything." The people in the room immediately noticed this change. Everyone was astonished and turned to look at him as they all shared the thought, "Is that boy lying?" Herbert's expression relaxed slightly as he said, "You have nothing to do with that, right?" Ian replied nonchalantly, "Yes." And it seemed Herbert was very pleased with this answer. He said, "Of course not. You couldn't have killed him. Thank you for your honest answer to this difficult question." After that, the Tower Master clarified with another statement. "When I said there were traces of mana on his body, that was just made up. He slipped off the bridge and died." That statement seemed to suggest that he believed he had successfully tested Ian's resolve. Ian remained silent, not responding, as he was the only one who knew that this performance of his had succeeded beyond expectations, but the story wasn't over yet. Herbert added, "I want to end this meeting here and go eat, but I still have work to do, so I hope you understand." The voice in that room rang out evenly. As you may know, his talent is unprecedented even within the tower, with a mysterious power that is unclear, so we must be extra cautious. He explained this and then continued about your current limits and how far you can go with a crystal ball placed right where Ian is sitting. According to Herbert, the device in front of you is called a mana tank. You can consider it an important component that operates most of the tower, and its function is crucial. This has been explained by the Tower Master to Ian. Currently, there isn't much mana stored inside, which is why it has this color. But when it contains more mana, it will turn blue. Herbert instructed you to try pouring mana into it. Ian asked back, "Pour it all in." He replied, "Of course, because we want to see your limits." Ian approached the mana tank, mentally calculating that the tank could hold the mana of a level 3 mage. pouring in an amount equivalent to a level 2 mage would be the wisest decision. After thinking this through, he placed his hand on it, telling himself that if he showed them the amount of mana they expected, he could minimize their doubts and be classified as a level 2. Suddenly, he hesitated for a moment as thoughts flooded in. But why? I'm just a level 8 mage. I'm not a wizard or a historically renowned leader. I've always read and understood emotions and lived a life of calculations. While he was lost in thought, the tank had turned blue at some point. Remembering his past life, he could give up everything power glory. He could relinquish everything, and a continuous stream of mana was emanating from Ian's body. And it flowed into the tank, but he remained deep in thought, not understanding anything more than the powerful mana that was surging more and more. It can be affirmed that when it comes to magic, no one stands above Ian. The mana tank received a large amount of energy, and it was turning darker blue. Just a second later, it immediately could hold no more and cracked open. Then, in the next moment, the tank completely exploded, causing those around to gasp in astonishment. Streams of mana escaped from the tank, flying throughout the room. It seemed that Ian had truly poured all his magical power inside, and his breathing became more difficult. He tried to regulate his breathing. Even Herbert, witnessing the scene, was left speechless while the others stood frozen. Only Helen spoke up. "How is this possible?" She picked up a shard of the tank. The mana tank could hold the mana of a level 3 mage. A thought flashed through her mind. Could this child be even stronger than a level 3 mage? Ian had regained his composure a moment after he left. By then, the sky had turned golden still in that room. An angry hand slammed down on the table, shouting, "Ian, the rumors about that boy are true." Ronan, unable to contain his anger, stood up and said loudly, "He is also a level 4 mage. This means he is on par with all of us except for the Tower Master." His anger surged even more as he recalled Ian's reaction when asked about Jonathan's death. Clearly the reaction of someone lying. He pressed on, "What do you think this means before Ian becomes a serious threat to us?" "We must restrain him." Everyone in the meeting fell silent, pondering something. After hearing him say that, Ronald believed that attending and graduating from the academy and then serving for 5 years, didn't everyone think we should cancel those and tame him right away, huh? Herbert then spoke up, saying it would be a bit difficult, but he was right. Ian's time at the academy would only be a waste. Instead, he is a threat to those other students. Even high-level wizards like us find him bothersome. How would the newcomers and young wizards feel? As soon as he finished speaking, the expressions of the other wizards grew even more grim. Then Herbert, ignoring everyone, continued that whether Ian killed a soldier or prevented death, it didn't matter, because he believed that what was important was that while the probing spell had no flaws, we would never know if his lies had any effect on us or not. Herbert seriously reiterated an important point that everyone probably knew, but our top priority was the value of this tower to him. The more powerful wizards there are here, the higher the tower's status. Suddenly, someone questioned why not accept Ian as the 12th high-level wizard, and officially announced the birth of a level 4 wizard. Of course, Herbert knew this well, but due to his talent and age, he thought it would be best for a special high-level wizard to teach him. What does everyone think? All the wizards present voiced their agreement, saying it sounds good. I agree. I hope so too. Hearing this consensus, Herbert was pleased and said, "Good." Then he assigned someone to be responsible for educating Ian. Suddenly, a hand from someone voluntarily raised and said, "I will do it." A few days later, Ian returned to the Ivory Tower, but this time he came back in a different identity. Ian was still a bit stunned, not expecting to be recognized as a high-level wizard. It happened so quickly. He stood in front of the tower for a moment, lost in thought he had already guessed. But it happened too fast. At that moment, the familiar figure of Maris appeared again. As soon as she saw him, she called out, "Sir Ian!" Seeing her, Ian was also a bit surprised and said, "We meet again." Maris hesitated and replied, "I heard that you are a level 4 wizard." Ian felt a bit embarrassed hearing her say that. "Yes, that's how it is." Maris's eyes sparkled with admiration. "It's amazing to be a high-level wizard at just 12 years old. That terrible rumor is true." Ian replied, just to be polite, "What kind of rumors are spreading?" Then she cheerfully looked at him and said, "Surely you have heard the news, but I have been assigned to assist you for a year." She still maintained a friendly attitude, saying, "Thank you for your help." Ian smiled back, replying, "You can speak comfortably. You are my senior." The term senior immediately astonished Maris. It was as if she had just received a boost of motivation. Her enthusiasm surged. Then since I am your senior, let me show you around the ivory tower. Ian politely replied, thank you. And then the two of them went together to tour the ivory tower. Maris pointed to a building ahead. That is the Magic Academy of the Ivory Tower. She further explained, you were supposed to register there today. But you will be. The special training from the high-level wizards, Ian quietly followed along without saying anything, because in his mind he was thinking, they call this special training, huh? Just planning to turn himself into a loyal dog, indeed it was. Herbert, at this moment, Ian's gaze suddenly stopped for a moment because he had seen. His friends from the academy in his previous life, he recalled he had also stood there. However, in his past life, they were all assassinated by spies from the Ute clan during the First Unification War, so he never thought he would meet them again. In Ian's heart, at this moment, there was a sense of anticipation. Perhaps it would be very difficult to become close friends, but he should greet them soon after Maris introduced him. This is the private laboratory of the lady. She was also very considerate, saying I heard you would use it, so I cleaned it up. The door of the laboratory slowly opened. Here it is. Ian was surprised to see the room inside. He widened his eyes in astonishment, because this was also his room. In his previous life, seeing Ian's reaction, Maris immediately spoke up. When this tower was created 300 years ago, there were 24 high-level wizards, but now there are less than half left, so there are many spare rooms. She said that the tower master wants you to use this room for personal matters. After that, she left him alone in that room, so please wait here. I will go call the wizard in charge. The door suddenly closed behind him, and the atmosphere inside became silent as Ian stood there alone. He pretended to touch each familiar object that he hadn't seen for a while. Since the last time he entered this room, Ian nostalgically recalled the old memories here. Unlike the previous time this life he got this room 7 to 5 hours earlier, he had gained the authority of a high-level wizard. A thought came to his mind. There was something he had to do. That is to create a new force in the ivory tower. Ian silently calculated the time. In 6 years from now, he thought this would be the time Zhang Na began to act under the protection of the tower. I must create it before then. A force that could oppose Zhang Na, the one protected by Herbert. However, Ian also understood that this would be very difficult to achieve because it is hard to say that power here is based on loyalty to the Tower Master. The fear of overwhelming power and high level only has one possibility that could help Ian do that. That is, if he reaches the same level, not higher than the Tower Master, then it will be time for him to have full control over this tower. Thinking of this, Ian sighed, thinking it is best to behave like a polite child. Until then, even I cannot surpass level 5 with this tiny body. Suddenly, the sound of the door being opened roughly startled Ian as someone stepped inside without asking for his permission. Hello. Ian curiously turned around to see a forced smile on his face. It seemed he was about to encounter trouble again. Did they really have to send her here? It turned out that person was Helen. She stood there proudly saying, "It has been a long time since we last met," and then smiled as if provoking Ian. That rude brat, Ian thought to himself. Helen? Did they really have to send her here at this moment? Ian opened his mouth, intending to say something. He foolishly said she was the one who cleaned up the broken vase, but she was no longer angry, just sighed, saying, "It seems you are even more than rude." Helen calmly stepped forward. "That's fine. You must have heard the news after that." She continued the proper conduct of the tower's history, magical theory. Those are things you will learn at the academy, but the Tower Master wants to teach you in the tower. Remembering Herbert's words, he said something about how other kids would lose confidence if a monster like you studied with Helen just spoke while casting a spell. But the problem is, a book fell from the shelf due to Helen's influence. She arrogantly held a book in her hand and said, "What good does that do?" Meanwhile, a series of other books also flew out, and just a moment later, several books fell to the floor simultaneously. She waved her hand, tossing aside what she held, and said such boring things. "It's not my specialty, and those old hags teach much better than I do." Suddenly, Helen leaned down, getting close to Ian, and said, "Cecilia, you defeated that girl right." She rambled on that she had high hopes for Cecilia. The girl was quite skilled in combat magic. Perhaps if Cecilia hadn't been discovered by Ian, she could have continued and followed in her footsteps. Helen didn't expect that the girl was a spy. Her gaze fell on Ian as she said, "But you managed to defeat Cecilia." Ian silently listened to this red-haired woman ramble on. Helen added, "Since I have become your teacher, I will teach you something." A series of types of mages were listed by her. There are many different types of mages trained for combat, mages trained to support others, and mages who dedicate their lives to alchemy. The others Helen looked down on, calling them just useless. Then she turned to ask, "What do you think I am?" Ian sighed and replied, "The first type." "Correct," she said, pleased proudly, asserting that she could bet no one could defeat her in that field. Helen considered herself different from other mages who only cared about the elegance of a high-level mage. "I will teach you in my way," she said at that moment. She turned and walked away, then looked at Ian and said, "Follow me." Ian remained silent. She insisted, "Of course you have no right to refuse." A moment later, the two of them went to the training ground together. Helen looked disdainful. "Now do you understand what you have to do here?" Her voice rang out challengingly. "Attack me. Make me want to teach you." Ian looked at the rude woman before him and thought to himself that she was no different from her previous life. Even then, she annoyed him by challenging him, but this time he wouldn't let her provoke him. From the depths of Ian's eyes, his determination was clear. "I will cut off that thought." The surrounding mages were immediately curious about the two of them. Whispers filled the air. "What challenge is this? I mean, Ian fighting her. Isn't that a bit dangerous?" Helen still maintained her overwhelming confidence. "It seems there are enough spectators now. Shall we begin?" While Ian was warming up, she said, "You go first. I'm the teacher, so I'll let you." Ian took off his cloak and seriously asked her, "Are you sure?" That question successfully provoked her. Helen replied irritably, "Who's worried about whom?" He prepared his stance and replied, "Then I won't hold back." Ian said as he extended his hand forward to cast a spell, his eyes gently closed and his mouth murmured the incantation. It was clear to see the energy radiating around him. Helen stood there observing without any guard. It seemed he had seen a lot. "Are you planning to set up a barrier first?" Her gaze was filled with contempt. No matter what barrier it was, she could break it easily. "What?" As soon as she finished her sentence, a giant fireball was right behind Helen, ready to attack at any moment. Just as he finished speaking, a giant fireball was right behind Helen, as if ready to attack at any moment. At that moment, Ian cast the ice block spell, and the ice began to freeze from his feet upwards. In just a moment, the cold ice had reached his neck. Then Ian completely encased himself in ice. Helen stared in shock at his actions, thinking, "Is he joking?" She tapped the ice block a few times and said, "Is this the best you could come up with? You're planning to sleep in there until your mana runs out. Hello, can you hear me?" The reason Helen reacted this way was that the ice block is the strongest defensive spell that protects the user, but when activated, the user falls into a deep sleep and cannot use other spells. She continued to grumble, "Oh my God, I don't know what you're thinking. I'm such a fool for hoping that suddenly." Helen's words got caught in her throat because she heard a sound coming from behind, and the people around her also heard that strange noise. What is that sound? Only Helen could sense that the sound was coming from Ian's ice block. She immediately turned around, and the fiery red gaze of Helen became stiff. An unimaginable thought flashed through her mind. "No way. That can't be." Helen continuously denied it while still staring at Ian. At that moment, Ian's eyes, which seemed to be in a deep sleep, suddenly opened. Helen couldn't believe it and thought, "He can still move inside the ice." That thought made her unconsciously take a few steps back. Suddenly, a series of roots appeared around her, surrounding her. She gritted her teeth in annoyance and cursed, "Damn it." At this moment, the roots kept extending and attacking Helen, each one moving at an extremely fast speed. Just a moment of distraction could mean getting pierced by them. She had to do her best to dodge the attacks while using fire magic to counterattack. Helen looked at the roots chasing her and said in frustration, "Damn it, even if I try to burn them all, they won't stop. If this continues, I'll be the one in a dead end." Her attention shifted back to Ian. "Before that happens, I have to get to that kid in the ice," she thought to herself, trying to find a way to pull him out. However, Helen still hadn't come up with any ideas. "But what should I do? How can he move and use spells inside the ice?" While she was lost in thought, a root suddenly lunged at her from behind. Helen couldn't react in time and could only stare in horror at it. Then her scream echoed throughout the space. Finally, this red-haired woman was controlled by the root after everything ended. He had just released himself from the ice block and stepped out. Now she finally admitted, I guess the rumors that you have talent similar to the first wizard are true. Fine, I admit defeat. Can you get these filthy vines off me now? Kid. But Ian replied, not yet. Ending it this quickly would be very disappointing. Not believing her ears, she asked back, what? A moment of fear flashed across Helen. What more do you want? I said I admit defeat, and you're still not stopping. Ian slowly raised his arm to prepare for the next attack. At that moment, several sparks of electricity flickered across Ian's hand. Even the dark clouds in the sky began to gather, and seeing the terrifying scene before her, Helen screamed in fear, wait, kid. The sparks on Ian's hand became denser. Despite her shouting, this is just a practice. Helen desperately yelled, Ian, stop, stop. But Ian showed no signs of stopping. Just a second later, he cast the thunderstorm spell, and the area behind him immediately lit up with a large flash. Sparks of lightning fell one after another, leaving Helen and the onlookers in astonishment. Now they were completely silent, not saying a word. The vines and roots around were burned to ashes in her astonishment. By this time, now it was completely silent, not a word was spoken. The vines and roots around were burned to ashes in her astonishment at this moment. Helen just realized that she was not hit. The blow Ian aimed was precisely at the roots that were binding her. She never expected that someone as arrogant as Helen would think this way. In the end, she had such thoughts. Facing a 12-year-old kid, her fear grew even more when she discovered Ian was approaching her. Although Ian hadn't done anything yet, she hurriedly shouted, stay away. Now Ian softly spoke, Miss Helen. Just calling her name froze her in fear. Her whole body trembled upon hearing Ian's words. She could still. Ian spoke with a mysterious smile. What else can you teach me? This made her too afraid to say anything more, only able to shake her head vigorously. Ian smiled in satisfaction, having achieved his goal. If that's the case, I'll go ahead for now. After saying that, Ian turned and walked away. Each of his steps was light as he walked. Looking at the crowd in front of him, Ian spoke. I'm sorry for the request, but could you please step aside? I'm quite tired. After that, they all moved aside, clearing a path for Ian to pass. Perhaps the recent scene had made them unable to underestimate this young mage any longer. During a late afternoon at the Ivory Tower, the young mage of the Ivory Tower was hurrying along. Tower Master Herbert turned to ask his subordinate about Helen's current condition. He bowed his head and replied, She looks quite haggard. She hasn't eaten for several days. His face darkened. He never expected she would provoke a 12-year-old and ruin her own elegance. It was indeed foolish of him to think that he could break Ian's pride by having her teach him. He never thought Helen would be defeated by that kid. Only now did Herbert realize too late that from the beginning, this was not something that could be controlled. It wasn't a dog that we could leash to control, but a wild wolf. Herbert reassured himself, justifying his mistakes. We will surely need more time than expected to turn him into a useful tool. He hurried to a room, and the door opened as he arrived. It turned out that the person waiting for Herbert was Prince Jana. He spoke, You have arrived. Herbert respectfully replied, My apologies. It seems I am late, Your Highness Jana. He quickly closed the book in his hands and replied, It's all right. After that, he asked the Tower Master, Could you tell me the details? At this moment, Jana's face showed interest in the story. He expressed his desire regarding the incident involving that mage Ian. On a beautiful morning at Ian Douglas's villa, he joyfully skipped out. At that moment, he was wearing a new uniform with exquisite stitching, completely different from the simple clothes he wore before. His face was filled with excitement as he said, Dad, we are ready to go. The video was the same. He donned a new suit and cheerfully replied, Let's head out. He turned to Ian, who was sitting inside reading a book. Ian, I will take Glatt to the academy. It hurts, he chirped like a little bird. I will return leader, he said. The two of them gently closed the door and left. The father and son gently closed the door and left. When they just left, everything became quiet because only Ian was there. He pondered that today was the first day of school, and it hurt too much. The reason why the two of them were so happy was that Douglas was accepted into the Royal Alchemy Academy at the top position right after applying, proving his exceptional talent. Ian also felt quite relieved, thinking he had a clear understanding of the one-on-one curriculum of the Ivory Tower, so it would be easy for him at this moment. He closed the book in his hand and leaned back on the sofa, meaning he would be free for a while. However, he hadn't rested long before Ian stood up. At this moment, he thought that since he had turned back time, he had always been running non-stop. There was still no clear movement, but that didn't mean he would sit still. Thinking that Ian walked somewhere. To regain all his physical strength, he needed to develop more. Ian's thoughtful gaze looked through the window. His small hand, placed on the glass door, trembled slightly. It seemed he was still very worried. But can I just rest like this? At this moment, a maid entered, presenting Ian with an invitation card sent from the palace. Ian looked at the card and asked again, "An invitation?" When he held it in his hand, he still wondered what event it was for. Ian looked closely at the seal, and he realized that the invitation was from the Grand Prince. That evening, Ian had arrived at the location of the party, which was also a very splendid castle. Although he had arrived, Ian still couldn't believe that he was actually invited to a place like this, because there was always an unwritten rule that wizards who were not of noble birth were not invited to such parties. He placed his hands on his hips, hesitating, thinking, what is this guy thinking? Looking at such a vast castle, Ian thought to himself that he never expected the party to be hosted personally by the Grand Prince. Perhaps it was because, in Ian's impression, the prince he remembered from his previous life was very reclusive. When interacting with other nobles, he had never organized a debut event with any noble. His attitude had caused him to lose the opportunity to debut in the political arena, resulting in all the nobles turning their backs on him. Clearly, it was a dark time in his previous life. Unlike the Grand Prince, who had established trustworthy relationships with other nobles, ultimately he seized most of the political power from the Grand Prince. Ian sighed, resigned to the fact that the Grand Prince often ignored the Emperor's advice due to his impulsive and lazy personality, but he remained curious. He wondered what made him so proactive, but this situation must be beneficial for him. However, thinking back, he had never been close to places like this in his previous life. It seemed that Ian would just sit quietly in a corner. Finally, Ian gathered all his courage to go inside. He handed the invitation to the servant welcoming him, Lord Ian. Then the door gradually opened. He didn't know what awaited him inside. Inside the castle, everything was decorated lavishly yet elegantly in true royal style. As soon as Ian stepped in, all eyes turned to him. Everyone glanced at Ian and whispered something to each other. Ian tried to muster a polite smile. Indeed, it was very uncomfortable. Just then, the announcement of the servant rang out. The Grand Prince has arrived. All the guests in the banquet hall stood still. Then the door gradually opened. Who knows what awaits him inside? Inside the castle, everything was lavishly decorated, yet luxurious, fitting the royal style. When Ian stepped in, all eyes turned to him. Everyone glanced at Ian and whispered something to each other. Ian tried to force a polite smile, indeed feeling uncomfortable. Just then, the announcement from the servant rang out. The Crown Prince has arrived. Everyone in the banquet hall. Everyone stopped and bowed respectfully before the elegant steps of the Grand Prince Hayden as he entered, appearing with his neatly groomed hair. Wearing the same eye-catching dark blue suit, he softly spoke, "I would like to thank the esteemed guests who have come to my party today." He stood from the upper floor, his voice resonating clearly throughout the room. As everyone knows, I will host tonight's banquet on behalf of His Majesty the Emperor. However, I would like to introduce someone to you. He continued smiling as he turned to Ian. Ian immediately understood his intention. He was going to introduce himself. At that moment, Hayden announced in a grand voice, "The special guest of tonight is the youngest level 4 mage in the history of the Ivory Tower. Our esteemed guest from Moglian." He pointed towards Ian, and the name Ian was shouted loudly, causing him to freeze for a few seconds as the entire party fell silent for a moment. But Hayden broke the atmosphere with a bright smile welcoming Ian. "I'm sure you've guessed it. I organized this party to introduce you." Ian had to respond, "Thank you, Hayden," thinking that Ian actually liked it, so he replied, "It's nothing," only now realizing he had fallen into a trap. He thought to himself, "Damn it. This is a scheme to show the nobles that I am on the Grand Prince's side." With Hayden's character, Ian was sure this plan was definitely set by the Emperor, not the Prince. Then Hayden added, "I've heard about your performance in the tower," and he seemed very proud to say, "You were ranked as a high-level mage as soon as you arrived there. I can only imagine the faces of those old geezers." The Grand Prince recounted the first time he met Ian in Moglian. "I wondered why I had to go all the way there. For a scrawny kid, Ian replied, disgruntled. Scrawny, but I didn't expect you to be so amazing. The joy was evident on Hayden's face, and from the bottom of his heart, he sincerely said to Ian, Although I organized this party for my father, I truly think meeting you there was a wonderful choice. After saying that, he even winked at Ian, but everything was just beginning. Because Hayden said, I also want to introduce you to someone. He pointed across the room and said, This way. Ian, still in shock from the surprise, was hit with another surprise as Hayden pointed to a girl with shiny golden hair wearing a gown designed similarly to the Grand Prince's. The prince was not at all surprised when he introduced to Ian that this was his sister Harry. She gently spoke, Nice to meet you, Ian. I am Harry Green River. Harry's voice rang in his ears. Your name has become quite famous, even in the palace, so I have heard about you. Her radiant energy overwhelmed Ian. I am honored, Harry said shyly. Unfortunately, today I can only come to greet you, but please accept my invitation to lunch with me so you can tell me about your achievements in Muggle. Ian replied, I can only tell you a few stories about magic and monsters, so I'm afraid you might get bored. But she was still very excited to respond. It's okay. I am not only interested in magic, but also in how this world operates. Harry smiled sincerely. So I really want to chat with you, Ian. She added, Then I will contact you soon by letter. I hope you will enjoy the party today. Ian politely replied, Thank you for your kindness, Your Highness. After that, Harry and Hayden left, leaving Ian standing there alone. He quietly watched the princess's back as she happily chatted with other ladies, making Ian think, Princess Harry, she looks completely different. After that, Harry and Hayden left, leaving Ian standing there alone. He quietly watched the princess's figure as she happily chatted with the other ladies, making Ian think that Princess Harry looked completely different. From what I saw in the palace, you then looked over at Prince Hayden, who seemed worried, but he was doing quite well in his duty of hosting the party, I thought. Ian then decided that he should leave. Before things got complicated, Ian quickly pushed the door open, and his gaze immediately caught sight of a young man there. Looking at the person in front of him, Ian gently called out, Sir, Oliver, right. He turned to look at Ian puzzled and asked, Ian. As Ian approached, he complimented Oliver. Sir Oliver, you look wonderful in this formal outfit. The knight's cheeks immediately flushed. He shyly replied, This is a command from His Highness. After he finished speaking, the two suddenly fell silent, perhaps because there was nothing more to say. The atmosphere around them suddenly became strange. Ian felt awkward, thinking that perhaps he shouldn't have stepped out onto the balcony at this moment. Oliver spoke up first. I've heard rumors about you. Curious, Ian asked back. Rumors? Oliver recounted, Helen, the High Mage of the Ivory Tower. I heard you defeated that woman. Ian heard this phrase once again. Because the prince had also mentioned something similar earlier, I've heard about your performance in the Ivory Tower. Ian then replied, So, such a rumor is spreading outside. I thought most of what happened in the Ivory Tower was kept secret. For Oliver, this might be an everyday matter, so he casually said, There isn't much information like that. What else can a knight do in this day and age? Hearing the three words, this day and age, Ian fell into contemplation. He thought that currently in the Death Kingdom of Green River, there were a few top-tier mages of energy affinity, while knights were significantly weaker. They were regarded as nothing more than decorations or embellishments. Meanwhile, Oliver spoke up, I am very surprised. You are not only the youngest level 4 mage, but also defeated Helen, the one called the Lady of Fire. Sometimes I even wonder if you are really as young as you look. Upon mentioning age, Ian felt a bit guilty and said, You overestimate me. Suddenly, Oliver said seriously that now no one could doubt that he had the trust of the Grand Prince, who usually avoided communication with other nobles. He personally organized this party just for you, but because of that, there is something I need to clarify. The captain of the Night Squad is currently kneeling before you. Just to clarify one thing, which side will you stand on? Ian held back for a moment when he saw how serious he was. To me, who you are or how you could reach that level at such a young age doesn't matter, because what I am concerned about is the mages of the Ivory Tower openly assisting the Fifth Prince. So now I ask you, will you stand with the Ivory Tower? Ian calmly replied, That's a meaningless question. Who could give a decent answer in a situation like this? However, Oliver still insisted, As a knight serving the prince, I need to hear your answer. His sharp gaze was fixed on Ian as he said seriously, Are you a friend or a foe? Ian knew well that Oliver Zeus, the loyal knight, had stood by the Grand Prince until the very end, but he still answered ambiguously. I'm not sure yet. An idea flashed in his mind. Perhaps he could hint to Sir Oliver. He then continued, However, I will never side with the fifth prince. Ian said this firmly, and it was clear that Oliver was very surprised by that answer. He glanced around, fearing someone might overhear, but Ian had calculated everything beforehand. He reassured Oliver, I used magic so only you can hear this. He glanced around, fearing someone might hear, but Ian had planned everything beforehand. He reassured Oliver, I used magic so only you can hear it. So don't worry. Have you asked Oliver if that answer has been given yet? He smiled and replied that for now, that was a perfect answer. At that moment, Oliver felt more at ease and asked, Can I make a request? Ian wondered, What kind of request do you mean, with all seriousness? Oliver said, Until you give a definite answer to my question. Please be my sparring partner. I need strength. He heard that request. Ian immediately guessed, You want to spar. Do you want me to teach you how to fight against a wizard? That sword, can it be pointed at me in the end? But Oliver didn't confirm and followed Ian's vague way of speaking. I can't completely deny that possibility. Ian half-joked, half-seriously said, Sir Oliver, your skin seems a bit thick, huh? He looked straight at him and said, Clearly, I will refuse this request. I gain nothing from that. Suddenly, Oliver took something off his neck. He carefully held it in his hand, this necklace. The Queen personally gave it to me on the day I was appointed as the bodyguard of the Crown Prince, he sincerely said. Oliver said it was a necklace enchanted to purify the mind. Ian seemed to recognize this item. It's one of the royal treasures that I couldn't find any information about in my past life, except that the last owner was the Queen. Oliver handed that precious necklace to Ian. I will pay with this necklace. I believe it will be more useful to you, wizard, than to a knight like me. Ian asked again, Isn't this item personally granted to you by the Queen? Oliver did not hesitate to say, She granted it to me to serve my master better. My proposal is to fulfill that request. I'm sure she will understand. Ian hesitated for a moment without answering, but eventually decided, If you are willing to go that far, then I accept. I will take this necklace, saying that he immediately took it in his hand. On Oliver's face, it was clear that he was completely satisfied at that moment. Suddenly, there was a loud explosion right inside the banquet hall. The two of them were astonished and looked inside simultaneously. The explosion was so powerful that it caused the door, which was tightly closed, to burst open. Flames and smoke billowed out. Oliver's gaze immediately lost its usual calmness as he realized the crown prince and princess were still inside. They are still in there. Then he shouted in despair, Call the prince! Ian and Oliver quickly went inside. Oliver's urgent voice rang out, Where are you, your highness? Shortly after Hayden's voice responded, Captain over here, fortunately both the crown prince and princess are fine. Hayden frowned. How could something like this happen in the palace? Oliver hurriedly ran to them. Are you both okay, prince and princess? Hayden replied, We're fine. The knight team indeed acted swiftly as Deputy Pollins and other knights also rushed in. Your highness, are you okay? Then he turned to Oliver and asked, Captain, are you injured? Oliver immediately asked, I'm completely fine. What's the situation outside? Quickly report the current situation. A series of unidentified explosions are occurring inside the palace. We have activated the emergency communication sphere, and we are mobilizing all forces to find the source of this explosion. Ian seemed worried when he heard about the emergency communication orb, because the emergency communication orb of the palace is a network connected to the Knight Command Center, the military barracks, and even the Ivory Tower. It allows the concentration of all available forces to mobilize to the palace, and that means the activation of the emergency communication orb means that every soldier and mage will gather at the palace. A troubling thought crossed Ian's mind. What if this explosion was aimed at that? He panicked, fearing that this would actually happen. Perhaps Ian decisively cast a mana barrier, a mana shield enveloping those present in the banquet hall. Remembering that Harry also knew how to use magic, Ian turned to the princess and asked if she knew how to channel mana into the barrier. She was surprised and said, What? Ian's tone was extremely serious. This is an emergency situation, so I need an answer. Harry hesitated and replied, I learned, but not waiting for her to finish. Ian interrupted. Then you can maintain it right. He then decisively turned away. Ian approached the group of maids beside him. I want to ask about a maid named Isabel. Has she ever been here? They all trembled when greeted by Ian. A frightened maid spoke up. Yes, she has. She was assigned to a separate palace, but she said she wanted to come see the banquet. Hearing this answer, Ian understood. Indeed, their true target was Cecilia. By concentrating forces at the palace through the explosion, they would infiltrate the ivory tower. When the surveillance was neglected, Ian calmly analyzed the situation. Now it didn't matter what happened to Cecilia, but he had to ensure she had information about him. Relay it to the Walker family. At the same time, in the prison of the ivory tower, someone was stealthily infiltrating this place. The footsteps stopped in front of Cecilia's cell. Then a voice said, "Long time no see, Cecilia. I'm surprised you're still alive." Because the person was carefully concealed, she momentarily did not recognize who it was. He slowly removed his hood. "It's me, Daniel." After that, the first thing he said to Cecilia was a criticism. "I'm very disappointed in you. I thought you were a good spy." Seeing him, Cecilia immediately became agitated and shouted, "Daniel, get me out of here!" He calmly replied, "Of course, but I need to check something." She immediately responded, "I haven't said anything. That brat Ian has known everything from the beginning, from the existence of the Walker family and those inside." Daniel suspiciously asked, "Is that true?" She touched the back of her neck and added, "He even knows about the mana seal that neither you nor I know." Hearing this, he said, "Cecilia, that's something most of the Walker family doesn't know. The superiors only told us after you were captured." Then Daniel asked, "So do you have anything else to say?" Cecilia replied, "That was all. We don't have any extra time, right? Let's go outside." However, at that moment his attitude showed hesitation, and right after that, the prison door slowly opened. Cecilia's face lit up with joy because she thought she had been saved. At that moment, Daniel called her name. Cecilia just for a moment turned to talk, but he directly stabbed her in the neck. Her eyes rolled back. As if unable to believe what had just happened, Daniel coldly watched her writhing in pain. Now he finally spoke as she was trapped inside. "The ivory tower. We debated for a long time about what to do." Blood continued to flow from Cecilia's wound, leaving her to wait for death while listening to him continue. She is a rather rare level 3 sorceress. So we considered saving her, and this is the conclusion we came to. Just as he finished speaking, Cecilia collapsed on the cold ground, even though she had just killed someone. But he smiled and said, "Then be strong. I mean, goodbye." Suddenly a voice responded to him, "You too," causing Daniel to immediately become alert, turning around and quickly throwing the knife. The knife flew quickly towards the target, but Ian only needed to tilt his head to easily dodge it. However, it still grazed his face, and he stood there calmly. Daniel shouted loudly, "Who are you?" Ian did not answer him, but looked down at the ground, seeing Cecilia's body lying there. He then said, "So you have eliminated Cecilia. That's good. Then I have one less worry thanks to you." Unbeknownst to him, his 2 legs had been frozen by Ian. He slowly walked towards Daniel, saying, "What a pity that I meet you today." With Ian's eyes cold as ice, he coldly said, "I swore I would kill you myself." Daniel, seeing he could not resist, immediately spoke up, "Wait, wouldn't it be better for me to live for you?" Of course, Ian had no intention of sparing him. "Finally, I can repay the suffering of my friends." Daniel panicked. "What are you talking about?" "I have never killed your friend," Ian replied. "Clearly not," because only he knew that there were 15 more before that happened. The cold ice continued to freeze his entire body. At this moment, Ian continued, "I promised myself that when I returned, I would put everything back in its place." And his hand gently touched the ice. In the blink of an eye, it shattered into hundreds of pieces. Ian looked at the murderer before him with cold eyes, then walked closer to the body. Indeed, there was a mana seal on the back of his neck. I have confirmed the mana seal on his neck. That is enough. At that moment, hurried footsteps echoed from outside. It turned out to be Ronan and the sorcerers of the ivory tower coming. He opened his eyes wide in shock and shouted, "Ian, what the hell happened?" Ronan hesitated when he saw the 2 bodies lying at his feet. On the other side, in the Emperor Terry's palace, he angrily slammed his hand on the chair and shouted loudly, "2 people have gone missing inside the palace." He loudly reprimanded everyone from a maid to the royal scribe. "What is the ivory tower doing while the criminals are rampaging in the palace?" Answer me, Tower Master. Didn't you promise to uproot all the festering roots within the kingdom, which is why you requested to hand over all authority to the Ivory Tower to hunt down the spies? Why does every word from Terry make all the nobles there tremble in fear? He then made the decision that I can no longer trust the Ivory Tower, so I will retract all related authority from the Ivory Tower. From now on, the Tower Master must share any information obtained from the search until now for the knights and soldiers. Do you understand? Herbert bowed and replied, I obey your command, your majesty. Terry rubbed his forehead and said, you can leave now. From now on there will be many things to do. Herbert quietly stepped outside as ordered. The emperor's attendant announced, Mage Ian, please step forward and pay your respects to his majesty. Ian slowly entered. Terry looked at him and said, so we meet again, the special guest from the north. Ian also carefully paid his respects to the emperor. Terry quickly got to the main issue. Thanks to your intelligence, we have been able to protect the empire this time. Ian remained silent as he listened. He continued, without you, we would have been powerless to lose a significant amount of important information to unidentified enemies, which would turn the empire and the royal family into a laughingstock for the whole world. For all the reasons above, I will never forget your achievements in this incident. Therefore, I want to personally express my appreciation and the reward I wish to bestow upon you. As soon as he finished speaking, a servant brought the reward before Ian. It was this, a striking blue cloak. Terry said, this cloak is the only item that Michelle Green River left behind my ancestor and is the only mage of the royal family. He explained that due to that person's will, he would not give it to anyone outside the royal family. So I want to say that I am only lending it to you. Of course I will lend it to you until your last breath or until you no longer wish to keep it. Ian was a bit surprised to see this. He thought to himself, Michelle Green River, the first and last mage of the Green River Empire. He is the hero who saved the empire and rose to the position of Tower Master with his magical abilities. His cloak is a rare item. Even in his previous life, Terry made a suggestion. Since this is just a cloak, I think you don't need to change your clothes. Do you want to try it on right now? Ian obediently took the cloak and awkwardly draped it over himself. Seeing Ian's disheveled appearance, Terry chuckled heartily. Looks good on you, doesn't it? I wonder when it will start. Ian also followed the order and took out the coat, then awkwardly put it on, looking disheveled. Terry let out a cheerful laugh. You look a bit messy, huh? Who knows when it will start just here?